hands he is. His hands, the whole public's in trouble, maybe. My hands, can't get it back.
Locating the murder weapon was of paramount importance, but Detective De Los Santos recognized that pressuring Hughes wouldn't yield results. Therefore, he opted for a gentler approach, allowing Hughes to gradually open up during the interrogation.
Well, you got an address I can go get the gun at? I'll just drive over there and pick it up.
It's not out of my place.
Is it buried somewhere?
Yes, sir.
But I wanted to get rid of that gun. I didn't want it around where he could come back and get it. So I disposed of it. I buried it in the side of the mountain.
Is it Old State Road or San Juan Road, San Juan Grade Road?
Yes, sir.
Can you point it out to me?
I hope so.
With Rita no longer under suspicion after 15 long years in connection to her husband's murder, the police now only had to compile all the evidence, generate a comprehensive report, and at last deliver justice to her family. As per Hughes's recollection, he dissed Santos.
Kim Basil.
In early October of 1982, 19-year-old Kim Basil mysteriously vanished from her home for several days. The story took an unsettling turn on October 17th, 1982, when Kim's family received communication from her. However, it was unlike anything they could have ever imagined, even in their darkest nightmares. To her utter shock, Kim's sister, 13-year-old Michelle Basil, answered a phone call that would forever haunt her memory, as it revealed Kim's agonizing torture and desperate pleas for help. But how did Kim become entangled in such a terrifying situation? To unravel this mystery and discover the eventual outcome of this disturbing tale, we must journey back to the streets of Portland. Situated in the heart of the Pacific Northwest, this thriving port city reigns as Oregon's most densely inhabited metropolis, with a population surpassing the 650,000 mark. Known for its green initiatives, bike-friendly streets, and farm-to-table food culture, Portland is a hub for sustainability and culinary delights, earning it the nickname Little Green Oasis. The city's neighborhoods offer diverse experiences, making it a welcoming place to call home. Sadly, Portland has one of the highest crime rates in America. And what happened to Kim Basil is just one example among many. In 1982, Kim Basil was a 19-year-old woman who resided in Portland, Oregon, along with her mother Carol Basil and younger sister Michelle. While various aspects of Kim's life remain shrouded in mystery, it's clear that she shared a strong and affectionate bond with her mother and sister. This is why her family grew increasingly concerned when they hadn't heard from Kim, who was in beauty school at the time, for several days in October 1982. Then, on October 7th, 1982, Michelle's phone rang, and it was her older sister on the other end of the line,
She was
worried
standing in
and
the
frightened.
shower. She just said that she was in trouble and she needed to come home. She was standing in the shower, so no one would know she was on the phone.
Before Michelle could inquire about what had happened, the conversation was abruptly cut short.
And then someone came in and found out she was on the phone, and they started to violently beat her.
Strangely, the phone line didn't disconnect immediately, and to Michelle's abject horror, she overheard the terrifying ordeal unfolding at the other end, where Kim was being subjected to unspeakable torment.
And then they started burning her with cigarettes. I could hear her begging them to stop burning her. I just listened as long as I could, and then finally someone hung the phone up.
Barely a teenager herself, Michelle found herself paralyzed with fear, unsure of what steps to take next, so she ran to her mother. After learning about the phone call, Carol Basil wasted no time in reaching out to the police. She could never have anticipated that the police would exhibit such a complete lack of interest in providing assistance in finding the 19-year-old.
I contacted the police and they told me I had to wait the 2 weeks to file a missing person. They considered her a 19-year-old runaway. She was an adult until they had something proving that she was gone.
Similar to many other cases involving missing teenage girls during that era, the police conducted little to no investigation, to say the least, until a year later. As Kim Basil's family continued to agonize over her uncertain fate, a significant turn of events unfolded within the neighborhood. A drug bust took place, leading to an arrest and the subsequent emergence of an informant. On October 25, 1983, over a year after Kim's disappearance, Detective Joe Goodale of the Portland Police Bureau received some troubling information. Someone had disclosed knowledge suggesting that Kim had met a tragic end, and individuals named Esther Benita Cahut and John Santmeyer, both associated with the local drug mafia, were implicated in her alleged murder. Esther held the position of second in command within the criminal organization, while John was a trusted confidant of the same gang. But what possible connection could Kim have with these people? According to the informant, whose identity was never publicly disclosed, before her murder, Kim had been dating Danny Longaria, the head of the area's Mexican mafia. The eldest members of the organization were always planning crimes with the younger people involved, so that if someone was caught, it wouldn't result in the arrest of the senior members. They were very good at it.
These families were infamous since the first day I came on the police bureau in the late 60s. It's just a way of life with them.
Apparently, Kim had been used by the family in a massive shoplifting scam shortly before her killing. Fred Meyer, a retail superstore in Portland, Oregon, realized that they might have lost up to $250,000 of merchandise. Caught by security cameras, Kim Basil was looking at possible jail time. So she turned to the Longoria family for protection. When she was denied, Kim threatened them.
She told them, you need to help me, and if you don't, I'm going to go to the police and I'm going to tell them about your cocaine trafficking, the safe burglary, and these thefts from Fred Meyer. Wrong thing to say to these people.
Detective Goodale believed that Kim, being young and inexperienced, had found herself in a dangerous situation far beyond her understanding. He strongly suspected that the Longoria family perceived her as a potential threat and had taken drastic measures to eliminate her. Now it fell upon his shoulders to uncover the truth and bring about justice. In November 1983, he met with Linda Estes, a Clackamas County detective who was well acquainted with the Longoria family. Together, they made the strategic decision to approach Danny Longoria in an effort to persuade him to snitch on his cousin Esther Cahut or his ally John Santmeyer, something the Longoria family was well known for. They had a history of secretly recording other criminals, using these recordings as bargaining chips in case of arrests. Their preference was to negotiate and provide information rather than face imprisonment themselves. As anticipated, Danny Longoria did not let the detectives down. While he declared his innocence in Kim Basil's case, he readily agreed to a police wiretap and pledged to provide information about John and Esther. So, Danny placed a call to Esther.
Lawyer said that I killed that broad. That you had the police
That's
believed
a
it.
story. That's a story. Swear to God. That's
that-
absolutely made up a story. You have nothing to worry about. You did absolutely nothing. I mean, I had no contact with you or nothing.
That's not the point. I don't want you to put a bum beef on me, man.
As Esther remained tight-lipped, yielding no valuable information, the detectives hit a dead end in the investigation. Then rumors began circulating on the street that Kim's body had been put through a wood chipper. Detectives feared that they might find scattered remains of the body on the ground, which they never did. With no additional evidence forthcoming and an uncooperative stance among members of the mafia gang, the case gradually went cold, remaining unsolved for over a decade. In 1998, an unexpected twist emerged when John Santmeyer found himself behind bars in the Clackamas County Jail for violating his probation. In an amazing turn of events, he requested a meeting with Detective Gary Muncy from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, expressing his desire to discuss the 1982 murder of Kim Basil. With the foundation of this group of individuals crumbling, John wanted to be the first to speak out, possibly for his own benefit. One winter morning, he sat down with Detective Muncy for a recorded interview. He explained that, at the time, he shared a home with Esther Cahut and her 3 sons, and claimed that his recollection of the day of Kim's murder was limited to a single memory of being awakened by Esther.
She had asked me to help move the body, for which she had already called her brother and her son, which is Roy and John, and she had showed me the body, for which down toward the lower part of the body, which would have been groin area, was a big wet spot to where I automatically assumed that she was dead already.
John claimed that he, along with Esther, Roy, and the other John, carried Kim's body concealed within a sleeping bag out of the house, stepping over a few people who were sleeping on the floor. They moved the body to the garage, where it was loaded into a pickup truck.
And from there, I had went back to sleep, and that was that.
Detective Muncie suspected that John Santmeyer's involvement that night was much more than he was letting on. But prior to considering charges against anyone for murder, Detective Muncie recognized the critical need for additional evidence, particularly the recovery of Kim's body. Fortunately, Detective Muncie would soon have an opportunity to make progress on the case. Thanks to Benny Munoz, Esther Cahoot's nephew. Benny had been arrested on attempted murder charges just 2 weeks later. In what appeared to be a promising development, Benny displayed a notable eagerness to cooperate in exchange for a deal from the district attorney's office, indicating his willingness to provide information about his aunt. Benny revealed to the detectives that over the years, he'd heard stories about a young girl who'd been killed and buried on his family's property. Even more remarkably, he admitted to having dug a hole on the property himself, although he was unaware of its intended purpose at the time.
I heard him talking to somebody on the phone about property up in front that my mom and dad was selling. That's how I knew that she was going to be moved up to there. I was the one that dug that hole. Did you dig it for any reason? No. Why did you dig it? For an outhouse. I thought it was going to be used for a grave.
To assist in the investigation, Benny even drew a detailed map pinpointing the area where he believed the body might be located. Michael Gates, another detective from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, embarked on a journey to the remote lands of Friends, Oregon with his team. His mission was to scour the property in pursuit of any evidence that could lead to the discovery of Kim Basil's body. And sure enough, on February 10th, 1998, they located human bones inside a sleeping bag. The dental records inevitably proved that the remains belonged to 19-year-old Kim Basil. Following this crucial discovery, Detective Gates reached out to Kim's family and conveyed the progress in the case. After enduring 16 years of agonizing uncertainty, Kim's family finally had some closure regarding what had happened to her. However, the individuals responsible for this were still at large, and Detective Gates was determined to bring them to justice. Despite the caution within the Longoria family that speaking to the police could lead to dire consequences, Detective Gates decided to take his chances. He approached Frank, a cousin within the Longoria family who'd recently been released on bond, in an attempt to gather further information and build a solid case. At first, Frank was hesitant. However, once his wife encouraged him to do what was right, he went back the next day and sat for a taped interview.
I was drinking with this associate, John Satmeyer, and he was a little intoxicated, and he started talking about how he smothered her.
Frank even took a polygraph test and passed with flying colors. With the discovery of Kim Basil's remains and the information provided by Frank, on March 9, 2000, John Santmeyer was arrested on charges of first-degree murder. However, Detective Gates, who believed that Esther Cahoot was equally responsible for Kim's demise, wasn't fully satisfied.
I wanted anybody that was involved in this case in prison. And we knew she was involved. I just couldn't prove it at the time.
Recognizing that John Santmeyer might potentially implicate Esther, detectives conducted another interview with John on May 31, 2000, inside the Multnomah County Jail. The detectives had long suspected that Kim had endured hours of torture before her death. John appeared to confirm the suspicion, asserting that Kim was already tied up inside the sleeping bag when he and Esther made the fatal decision to end her life.
After Kim up the minute, the 8, which was put this way, she's in the sleeping bag. They brought me into the front room, showed me Kim was in the sleeping bag, all the stuff, part that was shown in her head.
John went on to illustrate to the detectives how they'd restrained Kim, ensuring she couldn't resist until she finally didn't.
And there was such a struggle with it that during the portions of the time where Kim kept saying, I won't tell, I said, Esther, I can't leave, so we switched spots. And
I didn't sit arm for arm while Esther sat on her face with the pillow. I basically just grabbed around her so she couldn't move on.
After making sure that she was dead, John had driven to the mountains and disposed of her body in the exact location where it was ultimately located.
After the came up, she's in the sleeping bag. They brought me into the front room, showed me Kim was in the sleeping bag, all the up, part that was showing her head.
And he showed me how he held her down until Kimmy stopped struggling.
And there was such a struggle with it that during the portions of the time when Kim kept saying, I won't tell, I won't tell, I won't tell, I said, Esther, I can't believe it. So we switched spots. And I didn't sit arm for arm while Esther sat on her face with the pillow. I basically just grabbed around her so she couldn't move on.
And when she stopped struggling, they held it down for a couple more minutes to make sure she was dead.
Why did Esther want him dead? To show off the hey, and you know it's done, I can do it, you know, hey.
Following this interview, Esther Cahoot was also indicted for first-degree murder. However, she entered a guilty plea to manslaughter and received a comparatively lenient 9-year sentence. John Sandmeyer faced a more extended period of incarceration as he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. Underscoring the nuances of the criminal justice system, Esther only served a portion of her sentence and was released on November 4th, 2005. Portsmouth, a city in Rockingham County, New Hampshire, United States, is a historic seaport and popular summer tourist destination on the Piscataqua River bordering the state of Maine. And it was here that the tragic story of Laura Kempton unfolded back in the 1980s. Laura was born on July 3, 1958. Although details about her early life are scarce, we do know that she grew up in the college town of Durham. At the age of 22 in 1980, Laura decided to make Portsmouth her home. By the summer of 1981, she secured a ground floor apartment on Chapel Street, situated at the northern edge of the downtown district. This strategic location was close to the Portsmouth Beauty School, where Laura was a student. With just about 6 months left before completing her training to becoming a hairdresser, Laura took on various jobs to support herself while attending school. Her apartment's proximity to Portsmouth shops and restaurants allowed her to find work easily. She worked at Cairns Ice Cream, where she served sundaes to summer tourists. She also worked at Marco Polo, a novelty gift shop on Market Street. Laura had a vibrant social life and loved Portsmouth's nightlife. Her frequent outings with friends led her to popular venues such as the Ranger Club in the Riverside, where she indulged in her love for dancing and mingling in lively crowds. Despite not being in an exclusive relationship, Laura was romantically involved with a man named Charlie. Notably, Charlie was the saxophonist of a band that performed at Luca's, a local restaurant. On the night of Saturday, September 26, 1981, Laura enjoyed a night out with friends at the Riverside Club, a popular dance venue in Portsmouth. It was during this evening that she crossed paths with a man simply identified as JR. He asked her to dance, and the connection between them grew. After the venue closed, they headed to Laura's place in JR's car. Laura extended an invitation to JR to spend the night, and he accepted. The following morning, on Sunday, September 27th, the pair had breakfast together at Goldie's Deli around 9:30 a.m. The meal was brief because Laura had to start her shift at Marco Polo at 10 a.m. To ensure she made it to work on time, Laura left JR at the deli. Later accounts from some acquaintances confirmed this, recounting that Laura hurried off to work, leaving JR at the breakfast spot. After finishing her work shift, Laura went home, took some time to relax, and then prepared to head out again. Around 9 p.m., Laura's friend Karen Weiss arrived at her apartment. After catching up, the two young women ventured out for the evening. Their first stop was Luca's. According to Karen, they danced after dinner at Luca's, and Laura drew the attention of several men. Leaving the restaurant around 1 a.m., the two friends said their goodbyes on the front steps of 20 Chapel Street. Karen headed home, unaware that it would be the last time she would see her friend alive. On the morning of September 28, 1981, Officer Ron Grivois strolled through downtown Portsmouth, New Hampshire, near the Old Harbor. His destination was Laura's residence, where he intended to serve her a court summons for neglecting to pay her parking meter violations. Upon arriving at the apartment, Officer Grivois knocked, but there was no response. Testing the front door, he found it unlocked. Upon entry, a discerning sight greeted him. A messy pile of bedding near the door was illuminated by a beam of light, revealing a pair of legs protruding from beneath blankets. These legs were bound at the ankles with what seemed to be a white cord. Beneath Laura's body, a substantial pool of blood had soaked into her oval-shaped brown rug. Instinctively realizing the severity of the situation, the officer withdrew from the scene. He quickly surveyed the hallway and checked the building stairwell, but found nothing suspicious. Satisfied that the immediate scene was secure, he stepped out and called for backup on his radio. Upon arrival, the detectives, led by seasoned investigator William Mortimer, carefully examined the crime scene. Disturbing details emerged. Bloodstains adorned the walls and upward strokes, closets and drawers were left in disarray, and Laura's personal effects were strewn haphazardly throughout the space. With care, they removed the mattress and blankets, revealing Laura's nude and battered body lying on her back. A gray telephone cord from the kitchen was tightly wound around her neck, and a green pillowcase concealed her badly beaten face. Upon removing the pillowcase, Mortimer uncovered Laura's battered face. The medical examiner would later say that she'd endured punches to the face and severe blunt force trauma to the left side of her head, which nearly collapsed her skull. Adjacent to her lifeless form lay a wine bottle, which was presumed to be the murder weapon. Adding to the puzzling scene was a cigarette butt, despite Laura not being a smoker. Later that afternoon, Laura's autopsy was performed by Rockingham County Medical Examiner Dennis Carlson, a certified pathologist at the nearby Exeter Hospital. In addition to confirming that Laura had succumbed to massive head trauma, Dr. Carlson discovered evidence of assault. He collected vaginal swabs, scrapings from the skin on Laura's upper left thigh, and swabs from the...
As you may have heard, this year there are...
Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to rank the worst crochet projects in all of human history. I did not come up with these ideas, but I stumbled upon them while scrolling through a Reddit thread from about 2 years ago, and it had me laughing and gasping in horror all at the same time. I'll leave a link to the original thread down in the description box if you want to read all of the different ideas, but I have chosen 15 of my favorites because let's just say I found them the most interesting. I'm going to rate each one of these projects based on whether or not I think they deserve to be on the worst crochet projects in all of human history or not. And I would love to know what your thoughts are, if you think these projects should be on that list or not. Oh, hi, Pickle. Hi, buddy. Say hi. You say hi. So let's start with the first project, and it's one that I remember from my childhood. I thought that this trend had died back in the 1970s, but apparently I was wrong. After doing a quick Google search, I found that crocheted toilet accessories are alive and well. These include toilet lid covers, toilet seat covers, and toilet tank covers. Some of these are intricate lace patterns and others are Christmas, Easter, or Halloween themed. You can even personalize your toilet with crocheted flowers or even a cute little owl. Many of these projects look super well made, but if I'm gonna be honest, I just personally don't want my crochet anywhere near a toilet. For that reason, I do think that these projects belong on the worst crochet projects list. I hope I didn't hurt anybody's feelings. For this next project, I'm not sharing any photos, so you're gonna have to use your imagination, but it is crocheted underwear. I cannot imagine that these would be comfortable, breathable, or supportive in any way. But what is interesting is that I have this book of knitted patterns. This was published in 1940, and there is an entire section of crocheted underwear. And one of my favorites is titled Vest and Panties for the Older Woman. This doesn't look comfortable at all, but I guess it would keep you warm, especially because it was made with 100% wool. Oh my goodness. I have never been more thankful for synthetic, breathable, stretchy fibers in my life. So I'm sorry, these are going on my list of worst crochet projects ever. This next project is one that I had never heard of before, and it's crocheted barefoot sandals. And the best way to describe these is that it is a soleless sandal, not soulless, but sole-less, meaning it doesn't have a sole or the bottom of the shoe. And I don't think that I would ever crochet these for me or any of my family members, but I do think that they are very pretty, and I could see a teenage girl loving them, or if you're going to a music festival or the beach, they could be really pretty. And so for that reason, I honestly don't think these should be on the worst crochet projects ever list. Now, this next project is one that I totally remember from my childhood. If you are a person of a certain age, do you remember the crocheted toilet paper cover dolls? And I'm gonna be honest, I loved them back then, and I still love them now. There were different varieties, but my favorite were the ones that looked like a Barbie doll with the huge ball gown. I just thought that they were so beautiful. But while doing my research for this video, I did come across a set that were absolutely terrifying, and they were baby faces maybe that are coming out of the side of the toilet paper roll cover. And I thought, oh my goodness, can you only imagine waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and seeing those faces staring at you? But I'm gonna be super honest here. I have always loved things that are vintagey and a little weird. Even from the time I was a child, I loved dolls that were kind of creepy but cute at the same time. I've always loved Tim Burton movies and anything that's a little bit dark and kind of weird but cute. I love that combination, and so for that reason, I don't think that these should be on the worst crochet projects list. I say we bring the crochet toilet paper dolls back and horrify all of our family members. This next project was mentioned several times in that original Reddit thread, and it's the cat butt coasters.
This is not a procedure. It's just a hard-working cream.
Revitalift Triple Power with Pro-Retinol Hyaluronic.
And if you haven't seen these floating around on Pinterest or on your social media, let me set the scene. These are coasters that show the backside of a cat with his tail sticking straight up in the air. Now, you may know that I have 2 kitty cats that I love with all of my heart, but I really don't need to see that part of their body in crocheted form. But I will admit these coasters are pretty cute, and I love that the people that designed them and make them have an amazing sense of humor. And although I don't think I would ever crochet these for myself, I don't think that they deserve to be on the list of worst crochet projects ever. This next project is more of a current trend, but I've seen it a time or two, and it is crocheted amigurumi toys that have realistic butt cheeks, little booties. But I think that a lot of these are pretty darn cute, and one of my favorites is the crocheted apple designed by Tiny Curl. I just think this one is so cute. Another one that I found that is super adorable is the Cheeky Shroom by Miguel Crochets. I think this one is absolutely adorable, and I'll leave links to both of those patterns in the description box below if you just want to make one for yourself. So I think these are delightful, and I do not believe that these belong on the worst crocheted projects list. Our next project involves crocheting with something for the car, and that's a crocheted steering wheel cover. At first, when I was looking through the photos of this project, I thought, oh my gosh, these are so cute, I want to make one. But then this image of a crocheted steering wheel popped into my mind. And I imagine driving around with my hands on it, and I can feel it slipping on my steering wheel. And all of that cuteness, all of that desire to make one went out the window, because I actually think that this could be kind of dangerous. And I don't think that's a good thing. Yeah, they're cute. They're very pretty, but I think it would be better to crochet some seat covers. That would be a really nice little project. You don't need anything between your hands and that steering wheel, just for safety purposes. And so for that reason, I do think that this project, even though it's really pretty, it does deserve to be on the worst crochet projects list. The next project is crocheted food. Now, we're not talking about cute little crocheted food like this little teacup that has that pretty little smile, or these little pancakes with that face. These are absolutely adorable. But I'm talking about realistic looking crocheted food. I didn't know that these were a thing. I didn't know that there are tons of projects with very realistic looking food, but the more that I've looked at them, I am absolutely blown away. They are amazing. These would be so amazing for a child's play kitchen. And for me, I look at these designs and think, how did somebody come up with this? I think that my imagination and the ideas that I come up with are pretty humdrum. They're not super interesting like this. And I would just love to get into the mind of someone who crochets these very realistic looking food items and just live in there just for a little while. And so for that reason, I don't think that these should be on the list of the worst crochet projects ever. This next project is one that I thought was going to be really strange when I first read about it. But once I found the article about these creations, my mind was completely blown. Lisa Haitanen from Finland has crocheted life-size dolls of her family, friends, and pets. I don't even think doll is the correct term. These are actual replicas of her family and friends, and they are so realistic looking. I've never seen anything like it. I am in awe, and I cannot even imagine how much time and effort this went into. And these aren't just crocheted with stuffing inside. They have a metal sculpture underneath, and then she crochets the outside part. But even still, that is absolutely incredible, and I love these photos of the crocheted version next to the real life person or animal. And
this thing, it's what's going on inside of me. It's my moderate to severe ulcerative.
wow. In the description box, I'll leave a link to one of the articles that I found about her and her work. It really is one of the most unique crocheted things I've ever seen. So I do not think that these should be on the list of the worst crochet projects ever. So this next project is one that I thought was pretty awful when I first read about it. But then after thinking about it for a little while, I realized, no, this is pretty great. This project is a crocheted umbrella, and of course this would not work for rain, but it would be really nice for shade. And some of these projects are absolutely incredible. They are so intricate and colorful, and they're just magnificent. And one of my favorites is this cherry blossom crochet parasol pattern by Kairos Crochet. I'll leave a link for the pattern in the description box, but oh my goodness, how beautiful is that project? And so for that reason, I do not think that these crocheted umbrellas or parasols should be on the list of worst crochet projects ever. I wouldn't use them for rain, but I would use them for shade. So this next project is, it's interesting. Have you seen these amigurumi toys that have baby animals inside of them? And there are openings, usually in the back of the animal, where the baby animals can get out, or should I say give birth. And while I do think that these are a little on the weird side, I do still think they are an amazing opportunity to educate children. One Etsy shop I found is Lau Loves Crochet, and she has lots of different patterns for animals with baby animals inside, and she even has a human one with a baby inside. And I think that this is a fantastic opportunity, especially if you have a child in your life who is getting ready to be a big brother or a sister, or if you just have a child who's really curious about where do the babies come out? How do they get out? What's inside that mommy's tummy and making her tummy look so big? I think that these would be fantastic for that. It helps children to have those concrete things and say, this is exactly how this happens. Now, I do get why some people might feel a little uncomfortable with this, but if you really think about the intended purpose, it really is a great idea. And for that reason, I think that these do not deserve to be on the list of worst crochet projects ever. This next project is one that I have never heard of before in my life, and it's a crocheted nose warmer. Now, I live in North Carolina, and the only other U.S. states that I've lived in are Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, and you wouldn't need a nose warmer in any of those places. It does get a little bit chilly here in the wintertime, but Normally, I just lift up my scarf or my cowl and just put it above my face if I'm outside and I'm getting a little bit chilly, but otherwise, here where I live, you wouldn't need one of these. So for that reason, I feel like I am not the right person to rate whether or not this is a terrible crochet project or not. So I would love to hear from those of you who are Midwesterners, or you live up in Canada, or you live up in the Northeast somewhere in the US. Let me know in the comment section if you think that this is a great crochet project, or are you as puzzled as I am. Another project that was mentioned in the Reddit thread was a crocheted toaster cover. At first glance, I thought these were so adorable. I found one that was a camper van. That one is absolutely adorable. And then I found a kitchen set that is all different crocheted items for your kitchen, and it included a toaster cover. But then I started thinking about the safety concerns, and I am such a forgetful person that I am afraid that I would literally burn my entire house down with something like this. And I love that granny go round kitchen set, and I would make all of those other items, but for me and my forgetful brain, I am skipping that crochet toaster cover because I could not be trusted with it. And so for that reason, I'm putting this project in the worst crocheted project list. I feel kind of bad about it because I do think they're really cute, but for me, it's a big no. This next project had me scratching my head a little bit because I could not wrap my head around how these worked. These are the crocheted water balloons, and once I learned how you use them, I was like, these are absolutely amazing, and I'm surprised that they were on that Reddit thread. Instead of filling these up with water like you would do a traditional water balloon, you just soak them in water, and they act more like a sponge than a water balloon. And then you just throw them at each other, just like you would do with a water balloon fight. Many of the makers of these crocheted water balloons use Bernat blanket yarn, and they say that it works fantastic. And I think that these are wonderful for so many different reasons, and one of them is that they're reusable. They're not going to break out in your yard and you have to go around and pick up all the little water balloon pieces, and you could make these in all different colors, and you could use them over and over every year. And for that reason, I don't think these should go on the list of the worst crochet projects ever. Another project I saw mentioned was crocheted fingerless gloves, and many people mentioned that they are completely useless, and I could not disagree more. I haven't crocheted any fingerless mitts, but I have knit a pair, and these are the pinwheel mitts, and I got them from a yarn shop in London called Loop London, and they are absolutely beautiful, and that's one of my favorite yarn shops that I've ever been to. And make sure to follow them on Instagram. They have some of the most beautiful crocheted and knitted projects that I have ever seen in my life. It's extraordinary. But number one, these fit me like a glove, haha. You can make them to fit your hands perfectly. And like I said, I do live in North Carolina where we don't get bitterly cold temperatures. So if I'm out and I'm walking and I want to keep my hands warm, but I want to be able to use my fingers like for my phone, or if I'm taking my kitty cats out for a walk and I need to adjust them or take their harness off or something like that, if I'm using a buckle or I need to tie my shoelaces, I just could not disagree with this idea more that fingerless mitts are useless. I think they are very useful. And so for that reason, these are not going on my list of worst crochet projects ever. I hope you found this
telephone cord that had been used to strangle her. All three samples indicated the presence of semen. Dr. Carlson estimated that Laura had passed away between 1:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. This provided a crucial time frame for the tragic events leading to her death. With a sense of urgency, Mortimer mobilized a team of detectives and officers to conduct interviews with Laura's friends, family, co-workers, and schoolmates. Essentially, anyone who may have interacted with her in the days leading up to her tragic death. Given the intimate nature of JR's relationship with Laura, the police were keen to speak with him. JR confirmed that they'd both been intimate on the early morning of Sunday, September 27th, and again later that morning before they went for breakfast. According to JR, Laura had no visible injuries during their time together. He also shared intriguing details about Laura's habits that he observed during their brief time together. Notably, Laura was careful about locking her apartment door, even for a brief snack run. When they retired for bed around 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, she asked JR to double-check that the front door was securely locked. Despite the efforts of the detectives, no concrete leads emerged after this, and the case eventually went cold. The circumstances surrounding Laura's demise remained a perplexing mystery for many years, leaving the resolution of the case elusive. In July 2000, almost 19 years after Laura's murder, detectives submitted 2 DNA samples to Cellmark Diagnostics in Maryland for testing. The samples originated from scrapings on Laura's thigh area and a swabbing from the gray telephone wire found around her neck. In August of that year, Cellmark provided results, revealing an inability to develop a DNA profile from the telephone wire. However, they did obtain a partial male DNA profile from the thigh sample. Fast forward to 2002, the Portsmouth Police Department sent additional evidence to the Maine State Crime Lab for testing, including vaginal swabs and a cigarette butt found near Laura's body. Forensic analyst Kathy McMillan extracted 2 DNA profiles from the vaginal swab, one belonging to Laura and the other to an unidentified male. The cigarette butt yielded a partial male profile that matched the male DNA from the vaginal swabs. In their pursuit of justice, the Portsmouth PD first focused on testing JR, Laura's last known partner. To their surprise, JR did not match the DNA found on Laura's body. Despite their intimate encounter in the early morning of September 27, 1981, it was determined that JR's DNA wasn't present on her body. This unexpected outcome added a new layer of complexity to the investigation. Over the following decade, investigators persisted in gathering comparison DNA samples, leading to the elimination of hundreds of individuals as potential suspects. In 2022, a breakthrough occurred when investigators employed genetic genealogy to analyze DNA samples taken from Laura's body. This technique involves comparing unidentified DNA, typically from a crime scene, to DNA in genealogy databases to either narrow down suspects or identify their relatives. By uploading a DNA sample from the crime scene to a public genetic genealogy database, investigators identified a person related to the DNA contributor. Subsequently, investigators traced the biological parents of this person and discovered they shared only one biological son, Ronnie James Lee. However, they soon discovered that Lee had passed away in 2005 at the age of 45 due to acute hard drug intoxication. But this didn't deter them. Armed with this knowledge, investigators obtained DNA from Lee's blood card preserved from his autopsy. Subsequent testing in 2022 and 2023 revealed that Lee's DNA matched various samples from the crime scene. Additionally, authorities uncovered that Lee had worked in Portsmouth at the time of Laura's killing. Collectively, these findings led investigators to the conclusion that Lee was responsible for Laura Kempton's death. They asserted, beyond a reasonable doubt, that he'd broken into her apartment with the intention of robbery, taking advantage of her, or both.
In a decades-old cold case in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, officials have named a suspect in the murder of 23-year-old Laura Kempton, a beauty school student who was killed back in September 1981 inside her apartment on Chapel Street. Well, this afternoon, investigators say DNA technology led them to identify a suspect.
Ronnie James Lee. Mr. Lee was 21 years old at the time that he assaulted and murdered Laura Kempton.
Based on the comprehensive evidence gathered during the investigation into the homicide of Laura, the Attorney General concluded that if Lee were still alive, the Attorney General's Cold Case Unit and the Portsmouth Police Department would pursue alternative charges of first-degree murder. This would be based on knowingly causing Laura's death before, after, or while engaged in the commission of, or attempting to commit aggravated felonious assault. Alternatively, charges would involve purposely causing Laura's death by striking her with a blunt object. In response to this development, Laura's family released a statement expressing their gratitude to those who tirelessly investigated the case. The family acknowledged the diligence, determination, and extraordinary personal commitment of investigators over the past decades, leading to justice for her. Our next case leads us to Galt, a city located in Sacramento County, California. Living in Galt offers residents a sparse suburban environment, and it's worth noting that most of the inhabitants in this community are homeowners. It was here that the story of Lucille Hultgren unfolded. Not much is known about Lucille's early life, but it is known that she and her husband, Frank Hultgren, relocated to Galt from Idaho in 1968. They were the proud parents of 2 children, Frank and Henry. By the late 1970s, their sons had grown up and moved away, but Lucille and Frank continued to reside in the neighborhood. They were known for their kindness and love, often treating the neighborhood children as if they were their own grandchildren. Sean Jacobs, a former neighbor of the couple, shared that the Hultgrens had an open and warm-hearted nature. He recalled fond memories of being welcomed into their home during the summertime, where they generously offer cookies and lemonade. Sean emphasized that he'd never heard a harsh word from Lucille. According to others who were acquainted with Lucille, she led a simple and unassuming life. Just 2 years later, in October 1987, Frank passed away, succumbing to Alzheimer's disease. This loss sent shockwaves through.
West Hobart Haunted House. West Hobart is an inner-city suburb located in Tasmania, Australia. Over the years, dozens of allegations of supposed hauntings, ghost apparitions, and other paranormal activity have been made by tourists and residents of West Hobart. And it's honestly not too hard to see why, as West Hobart is a pretty old town with a generally creepy vibe. As is usually the case, most of these stories have either turned out to be fake, or the people making the allegations didn't have enough evidence to support their claims, which makes it almost entirely likely that they're hoaxes. But as it turns out, at least one of these stories actually has some amount of truth to it. Back in the late 80s and mid-90s, rumors started spreading of a house in West Hobart that was apparently so haunted it drove its residents insane. At first, the rumors created a huge buzz all over town, with the locals doing everything possible to stay far away from the alleged haunted house. It wasn't until months later that the authorities got involved and finally got a clear picture of the situation. While it was true that the house's residents appeared to be going insane, it didn't have anything to do with paranormal activity, but with the fact that a datura vine had been growing through the trees directly above the home and dropping leaves into the family's rainwater tank. For a long time, the family had been inadvertently consuming microdoses of the plant every single day, which made them slowly but surely start to lose their sanity as they sank further and further into delirium. In case you've never heard of it, datura is a species of plant within the nightshade family, also known as Jimson weed, the devil's weed, or devil's trumpet, and you'll see why in a second. Even though the plant itself looks pretty harmless, it's known for having extremely powerful hallucinogenic properties, which is why it was used for centuries by Native American tribes in coming-of-age rituals and other important ceremonies. The Aztecs also used datura as a painkiller in certain rituals, namely in ritual sacrifices, and it's also commonly used as an ingredient in the ritual of zombification in the Haitian voodoo religion, where it's referred to as the devil's cucumber. As you can probably tell by now, datura isn't your typical recreative hallucinogen, and there's a reason why it's really only ever used in hardcore spiritual rituals and ceremonies, and sometimes by naive people who have no idea what they're getting themselves into. In low to medium doses, datura causes extremely distressing, delirious experiences, and in higher doses it can lead to paralysis and even death. Nowadays, datura is recognized by most tribes as a highly toxic and dangerous plant, and have understandably stopped using it. Before we move on, I wanted to take a minute to talk about War Thunder, the sponsor of this video. As of recently, I've had a growing interest in history, specifically World War I and II, so when War Thunder it's unique. The Seek and Destroy update is out now, which added new missiles with active radar homing, making aerial battles on modern aircraft even more engaging. And they added 2 new maps, Mysterious Valley and Bering Sea. Rentals for the people. If you were to somehow go back to the 70s and spend some time in Staten Island, it probably wouldn't take you long to hear about an urban legend of a man named Crotchets. As the story went, Crotchets was a serial kidnapper and killer who lost his son and resorted to stealing other people's children to deal with his grief. According to the legend, Crotchets also had a hook for a hand, scars, burns, and open wounds covering his entire face and body, and a generally horrifying appearance. Considering the mass areas of uninhabited woodlands, it's not all that unexpected that a tale like the legend of Crotchets would make it into the mainstream culture at some point. Unfortunately, this wasn't just a tall tale made up by Staten Island parents to keep their kids from venturing too far into the woods and getting lost. Although the legend has some obviously made-up elements, such as the hooked hand and the horrifying scars and burns, at some point in the early 70s, children in Staten Island really did start disappearing. That's when the line between legend and reality started to blur, and the story of the real Crotchets immediately replaced the urban legend. This is the real story. Andre Rand was a man from Manhattan who was born in 1944 and moved to Staten Island in the late 60s. After working for 2 years at the infamously brutal Willowbrook State School for Children with Disabilities, Rand was arrested in 1969 and served over a year in prison for the attempted attack of a 9-year-old girl. As soon as he was released 16 months later, reports started cropping up of more little girls disappearing all over Staten Island, including 5-year-old Alice Pereira, who was playing in her building's lobby when she suddenly disappeared without a trace. Over the next decade, Rand was the prime suspect in the disappearances and deaths of several other young girls in the area. But it wasn't until 1983 when he picked up 11 kids from a local YMCA and brought them fast food before taking them to the airport that he was finally arrested and sentenced to 10 months in prison again. Throughout the 70s and 80s, dozens of young kids disappeared in Staten Island, and although Rand was often the last person to be seen with them, there was ultimately never enough evidence to put him away for a long time. For many years, he would often be seen hanging around young kids, going on walks with them, and even taking them to lunch and dinner with him at local restaurants. After years of letting him walk the streets as a free man, police would finally have a breakthrough in the case in 1987 when they found undeniable evidence that Rand had been behind the disappearance and murder of Jennifer Schweiger, a 12-year-old girl with Down syndrome. In 1988, he was sentenced to 25 years to life, and while he was behind bars, more and more evidence was found that tied him to several other disappearances in Staten Island in the 70s and 80s. Unfortunately, he was only charged with one additional major crime in 2004, which was the kidnapping of Holly Ann Hughes, thanks to which he will spend the next 13 years behind bars until 2037. If he lives that long, he'll be 93 by the time he gets out.
Let's say you run a gym franchise where people get ripped, but you don't know the music is too loud. You don't know what you don't know about your customers.
The Maine Hermit. The Kennebec Valley is one of the most beautiful regions in Maine, with over 5,000 square miles of forests, rolling hills, and natural paradise surrounding the Kennebec River. Many cabin owners of the North Pond area in the Kennebec Valley have described the area as the most peaceful place on Earth. But it hasn't always been that way. All throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, there were reports of over 1,000 break-ins in the North Pond cabins. For decades, nobody knew who was responsible for the thefts, especially since they were always carried out when there was no one home. As the cabin owners soon noticed, the break-ins seemed to follow a pattern, always peaking in the days before Memorial Day and after Labor Day. As for the stolen items themselves, they ranged from food, to cooking utensils, to books, to propane tanks, to toiletries of all kinds. In the absence of a concrete suspect, the locals eventually named the thief the North Pond Hermit, even though by this point there was nothing to suggest the break-ins were being carried out by a single person. Although it wasn't uncommon for groups of homeowners to venture out into the woods to try to find the North Pond Hermit, they never found a trace, which only added to the legend's mystery. One afternoon in 2002, well, 100 people attended a North Pond homeowners meeting, and when someone asked how many of them had suffered break-ins, almost all of them raised their hands. As you can probably guess, the North Pond Hermit quickly turned into somewhat of a boogeyman, with the legend frequently being shared over campfires in the area. For years, nobody thought that the person or people behind the break-ins would ever be found. But in April 2013, a man named Christopher Thomas Knight was arrested in the middle of the woods in the North Pond area by an officer who had made it his sole mission to bring the thief to justice. As soon as he was brought to the police station, the cops asked him why he wasn't answering any of their questions. At first, it seemed as though he was having trouble speaking, but eventually he responded that he was ashamed of himself. As it was later revealed, Christopher had been living out in the middle of the woods by himself in an unheated nylon tent, surviving only on the things he stole from nearby North Pond cabins. Shockingly, he had survived winter temperatures of 20 degrees below zero for years and hadn't been to a doctor or taken any medicine for 3 decades. What's most incredible about the hermit's story is that for the entire time he lived in the woods, he didn't have a single conversation with another human being, except for one time when he ran into a hiker and only said hi. Understandably, Chris had lost interest in keeping track of time, so when he was asked how long he had been in the woods by himself, he replied, since the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, which took place in 1986. As investigators later found out, he was 20 years old when he decided to become a hermit, just a couple of years after high school, although he never gave the authorities a real reason why he decided to disappear. In all his years of isolation, he went to extreme lengths to preserve his privacy. He never lit fires, only moved at night, and hadn't had any kind of communication with the rest of society for more than half of his life. He'd never driven a car, sent an email, or even known what the internet was until his arrest. Interestingly, as the cops dug deeper and deeper into his story, they realized that his only real possessions were his glasses, which he had been wearing for 30 years and could even be seen in his Lawrence High School yearbook picture from 1984. Everything else, down to his underwear and jacket, had been stolen. After the investigation, Knight was sentenced to 7 months in prison, after which he once again disappeared. According to the cops, he's now living a quiet, peaceful life in rural Maine. Purple Aki. Throughout the late 1980s and 90s, rumors of a massive bodybuilder called Purple Aki began to surface in the northwest of England. According to the allegations, Purple Aki would supposedly walk the streets of Liverpool hunting down young, muscular men and rugby players and oddly ask them if he would let them feel their muscles. If they complied, he would allegedly squeeze their muscles for much longer than was considered socially acceptable and would then ask them to perform squats so he could feel their quad muscles. Some teenagers reported that Purple Aki even went as far as to ask them to pose for him, and often offered exercise and nutrition advice for those who gave him the time. Because the rumors were so incredibly ridiculous, nobody really took them too seriously at first, and eventually the story of Purple Aki turned into an urban legend, with crazy details being gradually added to the tale, including one where Purple Aki would allegedly swallow teenagers whole if they let him feel their muscles. But as time went on, it became clear that Purple Aki wasn't just a made-up character created by bored teenagers looking to get some laugh from their friends, but a real person named Akinwul Arobic. Aki was often seen traveling across England by train carrying a plastic bag and asking young men if he could feel their muscles. Naturally, this made a lot of people uncomfortable, and it wasn't uncommon for Aki's face to be featured in local newspapers after several encounters with the law. Most of the accusations against him were related to his creepy behavior around teenage boys, but around 1986, the story of Purple Aki took a really dark turn. Early that year, 16-year-old Gary Keller was walking home from school when he ran into Purple Aki, who immediately asked to feel his muscles. Freaked out by the weird request, Gary said no and ran away. Later that same year, Aki followed Gary to a local outdoor swimming pool, and when the teenager noticed, he ran to New Brighton train station and jumped onto the railroad tracks to get away from Aki. Sadly, the story ended in tragedy, as Gary was accidentally electrocuted by one of the rails. Considering the whole thing happened because Gary was being chased, Purple Aki was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, charged with harassing 14 different teenage boys, and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. In 1988, Aki filed an appeal and complained that the only reason he had been convicted was because he was black. Ultimately, the judges agreed there wasn't enough evidence to prove Aki had been directly responsible for Gary's death, and believe it or not, he was freed and awarded £35,000 in compensation. Between 1988 and 2006, Aki went in and out of jail for failing to resist his compulsion to touch, feel, and measure other people's muscles. And in 2003, he was arrested for an additional 15 charges of harassment and witness intimidation, for which he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Just like any other predator, he was also forbidden from waiting outside schools in the area. A few months later, he was jailed for 15 months for getting up to his same antics. Upon his release, he was once again arrested a few weeks later in 2010 and then again in 2015. After his latest release, he reportedly moved to Leeds, where rumors started cropping up that he had passed away during the pandemic. However, those rumors were put to rest when videos started surfacing in 2023 of Aki walking the streets of Leeds asking random dudes to, you guessed it, feel their muscles. As of today, Purple Aki is alive and well, and will probably continue in his same behavior with or without permission for many years to come. Leiloyan. According to a Swiss urban legend, people have allegedly been running into a mysterious human-like figure in the Fribourg forest in the western part of the country near the town of Mals since the early 2000s. Based on the dozens of allegations that surfaced over the years, the figure has been described as being around 6 feet tall and always wearing a vintage-looking gas mask covering his entire face, a boiler suit, and a cloak. Most people who supposedly ran into the figure reported he or she was completely harmless, but this didn't make the encounters any less terrifying, and it wasn't uncommon for people to report the figure to the police when their children reported feeling scared. As expected, it didn't take local residents long to start adding their own crazy twist to the story, with some claiming that the creature was the ghost of a mentally unstable soldier, while other popular theories assured it was an alien. For a while, the story was classified as an urban legend, and the mysterious humanoid was given the name Lei Loyan, also known as the Ghost or the Hermit of Malls. Throughout the early 2000s, Lei Loyan was mostly the subject of local oral legend because there was no real evidence to support its existence. But in 2013, the story gained international attention when the Swiss/French newspaper Les Matins published the first ever photograph of Lei Loyan, which was sent in by a hiker. After the photograph was published, there was no turning back, as people from all over the country started to make trips to the woods outside malls for a chance to catch a glimpse of Lei Loyan. The last known sighting of Lei Loyan took place in June 2013 when a local woman named Marianne Desclous saw the figure clutching a bunch of flowers as she was walking outside. Later that year, Lei Loyan's clothes were found in the middle of the woods along with a wooden note titled "The Death Certificate and Will of the Ghost des Malls." In the letter, Lei Loyan accused the media of having murdered a harmless being by revealing its existence and turning him into a circus freak. The letter also mentioned that due to the unwanted attention, Lei Loyan had to abandon its daily walks, which were referred to as happiness therapy in the letter. After the cryptic note was published in the newspaper, many people concluded that Lei Loyan had taken its own life, although this has never been confirmed. As of 2024, nobody has ever seen Lei Loyan's true face, and many people have theorized that the figure was possibly a woman with a facial disfiguration who didn't want people to see her, which is supposedly why she wore the gas mask. But this line of reasoning will probably remain unconfirmed forever. The Bunny Man. In the early 70s, dozens of locals started reporting that a man dressed up as a bunny had started haunting the residential neighborhoods around DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. Although dressing up as a bunny in itself seems pretty harmless, what made the encounters a little scarier was that the guy would allegedly threaten children on the street with an axe and frequently vandalize people's property for no apparent reason. Even though sightings of the so-called Bunny Man were pretty rare, they seemed to follow a pattern, as the man usually appeared in secluded locations where there weren't a lot of witnesses. The story itself has a lot of elements of a typical urban legend and is kind of hard to believe, but through my research I found that it's all loosely based on a true story. In 1970, a couple was parked in a driveway close to a bridge on Colchester Road in Fairfax County when suddenly a random guy appeared out of nowhere, yelled at them for allegedly trespassing, and threw a hatchet at their car. Terrified, the couple left the area immediately before they had a chance to get a good look at the guy. As they reported the incident to the police, they mentioned the guy had been dressed in light-colored clothing and may or may not have been wearing something white on his head. Although the couple never mentioned anything about a bunny in their statement, as soon as the story hit the news, people started claiming that the hatchet thrower had been wearing bunny ears. Pretty soon, rumors of a man in a bunny suit threatening kids in the woods with a hatchet started surfacing all over the DMV area, and as the years went by, the stories got wilder and harder to believe. Over time, the legend of the bunny having an asylum full of mental patients so close to their homes, so the authorities supposedly put on
Hayden, and that person who looks rather fair-skinned in the middle is Chris Harris. I find it rather off-putting that Donald Harris does not mention many of his siblings in his piece about his Jamaican heritage. It seems like he's continually leaving out the white people. Comfortable. I'd almost say it's racist. Just abandon an entire side of your family. Like, don't you find that quite weird that that piece so much focuses on introducing and discussing everyone who's Black, but you leave out your own siblings? We've thus far, by the way, been able to locate 2 other confirmed siblings. So these would be the siblings of Donald Harris, the children of Oscar Harris and Iris, our white Iris Harris, who died in Broward County. He doesn't mention them. Did Kamala have a relationship with them growing up? I don't know. And I want to be clear, we still cannot find much information about Donald Harris himself. We did find some old newspaper clippings of a Donald Harris, which we are working to confirm it's him, that was involved in a lot of plays, in theater, and then drama in Jamaica. And I'm going, okay, well, the piece that I read about him, he was constantly speaking about the farm and the lessons on the farm. It would be wild if he turned out to be another theater kid, because you know that I have had my fill of theater kids and them being put into positions of power, a la President Zelensky, Justin Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron. So I'm really hoping that this is not the right Donald Harris, but again, we're working to confirm it. Still cannot find his birth certificate. I still cannot find really anything else that would make him seem legitimate to me. Like I can't find Donald Harris, but we are still looking, we are still searching, and we're not gonna stop.
Awesome.
Now I'm gonna take a quick pause here to thank one of our sponsors before we get into this next really interesting tidbit about the Kamala Harris scandal. First and foremost, I've been telling you guys about Hallow because so many people are recognizing that it is a time for prayer and people want to have a deeper prayer life but don't know where to get started. Well, I get that, and so does Hallow, which is why I'm excited to tell you about Hallow's new prayer challenge, How to Pray. Prayer can be such a daunting thing to undertake. Where do you start? What do you say? I remember when I was learning about Catholicism, being in awe of how many different practices there were when it comes to prayer. But it does not have to be overwhelming. Hallow's new prayer challenge will take you through short daily sessions over the next 2 weeks with an all-star lineup of spiritual leaders and guests, giving you all the essentials to creating a rich prayer life. They'll teach you how to pray through scripture, how to do imaginative prayers, how to incorporate prayers that have been around for centuries, and so much more. You'll get a new guide every day, and some of the guides include Father Mike Schmitz, Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in The Chosen, and Mark Wahlberg, and many others. The only way that we can get through these crazy times is by getting closer to God, and prayer is the best way to do that. So download the Hallow app for 3 months free at hallow.com/Candace. Again, that is hallow.com/Candace. All right, guys. Now, so many of you emailed me about Alves Cambridge. I was familiar with that. Never heard of that name. It's okay. So Alves Cambridge, interestingly enough, is the brother of our white iris down in Florida, okay? She had a brother named Alves, and they lived near each other in Broward County, and they were extremely close. Many of you guys pointed out to me that I missed in her obituary, and I did miss this, I don't know how I did, but there were so many pictures of her and her family, and so many pictures of Alves and his wife of 68 years with Iris. They were extremely tight-knit. That was all very true. And Alves Cambridge passed away in 2020, and in his obituary, there were some things that were of interest and sent me down various rabbit holes, and I'm still collecting that data. But I want to show you his obituary, particularly the second page of it, okay? So this is his obituary. It goes on and talks about how he, worked 6 days a week, opened a hardware store, and worked in Jamaica through 2 fires that destroyed his business. He persevered and rebuilt to the mantra that you can destroy the tree, but the roots remain untouched. Talked about how him and his wife, Vaughn, loved to travel around the world. Yes, there's a lot of stuff I'd like to speak to you guys about Vaughn, but first I want to introduce Alves because, like I said, there's so much information, it's important to slow it down. Look at this third portion here, okay? Al would want you to know that he was a Freemason and visited many lodges around the world on his travels. He was also president of the Jockey Club for a time, okay? So this means that when this man passed away, he wanted the world to know, this is, again, Iris's brother Alves, that she came over with on a ship. We found the ship logs. I believe it was in 1958. She came over with him on a ship, and they settled in Miami-Dade. And he wanted the world to know, after he passed away, that he was a Freemason and he visited many lodges around the world. Now, this is a great time for us to pause and discuss Freemasonry because there are so many different elements, cultural elements of this, which I think a lot of Americans have the wrong idea. Either they don't think Freemasonry is real, or they don't believe that Freemasonry is relevant, or they believe that Freemasonry is innocent. And I'm going to speak about all of those things. So first and foremost, what is Freemasonry? Full stop, okay? So during the late Middle Ages, the world was united under the Holy Roman Catholic Church, okay? So if you had any opposition to the church throughout Europe, you were forced to go underground, right? We were a Christian society. And among the only organized groups that were able to move freely throughout Europe were these guilds of stonemasons. And they would then be, therefore, because they could move freely, hence Freemasons, they were able to maintain meeting halls or lodges in virtually every major city. And the Masons were essentially very talented at architecture, and they had a bunch of secret knowledge, sometimes secret knowledge of architecture and of other topics. And that knowledge was dated back to the times of Egypt, right? And it was essential maintaining this knowledge in the construction of European churches and cathedrals. So one of the things that is well known is that Freemasons were in opposition to the church, right? They wanted to crush the church, which is why it is not ironic that the person who founded the Mormon church, as just one example, many of the churches, the very many Protestant faiths that we have, was Joseph Smith, and he was a Freemason. That's a fact, just as one example. Now, you may know some people that are Freemasons, and you're going, well, I know this person, and he goes to a lodge, and he's completely harmless. Yes, it is a known thing that 97% of Freemasons are not in the top tier degree of Freemasonry. And it is understood that at the top tier degree of Freemasonry, you essentially become one of the makers of the world. Now, I remember, and I've spoken about this on this podcast, but one of the things that kind of ripped me into a new reality last year when I was studying with some priests was they sort of looked at me. I was in London at the time, and they just said to me in the kindest way possible, you Americans don't know anything about real history. You know nothing about your own country. You don't even know that your country was established by Freemasons, right? And it's interesting, of course, that I'm referring to Catholic priests. I believe a lot of the reasons why people hate Catholicism or hate Catholics is because Catholics know history. They have been recording history for a long time. So if you're a Freemason and you're working to rewrite history, or you're telling people that America was established because of this or because of that, and you completely remove the aspects of Freemasonry from our textbooks as they have, then yeah, you are going to be at conflict with the Catholic Church, who remembers everything and keeps, very good records of history. So I'm just, for those of you guys who've never even heard of that, and like I said, I would have been among you. I'm very new to relearning American history through the lens of Freemasonry. Some known Freemasons: George Washington was a Freemason, Thomas Jefferson was a Freemason, Benjamin Franklin was a Freemason, Buzz Aldrin was a Freemason. Don't get me started. For those of you that have been listening to this podcast for a long time, you already know where I'm at when it comes to NASA and the weird satanic chants that they were doing to establish the Apollo program and all of the weird stuff that happened leading up to the moon landing. So I freaked out when I learned Buzz Aldrin was a Freemason. It's not helping my case in believing those moon landings, I'll tell you that for free. Franklin Roosevelt was another Freemason. Sigmund Freud, that got me into a lot of trouble this year because I started speaking about Sigmund Freud. He's a member of B'nai B'rith, and I was telling you, like, this guy who keeps writing about child sex, yeah, there are some things you should know about him. He was a Freemason. Mozart was a Freemason. Okay, so at a point in our history, and likely even today, it was all about a battle for power, a battle for dominion over the earth, and they had all different sorts of aims. And it is true that different groups, high degree of Freemasons, practiced sexual rituals. And again, that gets back into the origins of NASA. For those of you that are new to this, you got to go back and watch the NASA episode. Watch the Michael Jackson episode. Watch the NASA origin story. It's shocking. It's all in your face. You can look this up literally on Wikipedia. It's so known. I'm not like on a weird Reddit feed learning this information. They believed that some of these people, and particularly speaking about NASA, that you could perform these sex rituals and have these like group sex settings, and you would be able to summon demons. And they believed that they would be able to conquer the earth this way. These people who established Apollo thought this. These people, I was sharing a story, Aleister Crowley was one of these individuals. He was quite literally kicked out of Italy, by Mussolini because he was hosting a sex ritual amongst the powerful elite. That's what I think is the biggest takeaway. The biggest takeaway is that the people that practiced these sexual rites and believed in sex magic and did these things in an effort to conquer the world were elites. This wasn't like a random group of people in the middle of nowhere living in the desert doing this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, this was the most powerful people in the world in an effort to believe that they would be able to conquer the nations. It's important to know that as we continue to discuss everything that's happening, because I even had to reset my mind as I was looking into Kamala's history and all this weird stuff. And I was going, okay, what was the world up to in the 1940s, as just an example? If Donald Harris was born in 1938, what was actually going on in our country? Well, we're talking about World War II period where this stuff was going on, where you had elites that were practicing thelema. We're talking about when Freemasonry was relevant, where these sorts of individuals who thought like this, leading up into the 60s, obviously, free love, sex, rock and roll. Many people don't know the basis of that was Aleister Crowley's religion, thelema. That was the precursor. It wasn't like a bunch of adults by themselves decided to have multiple partners. It was that a bunch of elites behind closed doors decided to introduce sexual liberation as a means to conquer nations. And it worked. It crushed the church in the process, right? Having multiple partners is explicitly anti-Christian, obviously, making people not desire marriage. These are the sorts of things that actually took place in this country. And you can learn all of these things, by the way. I posted my book list on locals.com because people were like, where are you learning all this stuff? I'm like, I just read stuff that's outside of a textbook. And of course, start with that book, Chaos, because the 60s was a very, very wild time. People changing their names. Of course, prior to that, you had McCarthyism. In your textbook, you learned that he was just a paranoid guy, paranoid senator. It's not true. It was real. Communists were invading America. They were changing their names. They were selling our secrets. And he was brave to fight and stand up and to speak about it. Anyways, like I said, I want to just speak about that because when you see Albus Cambridge openly put something like Freemasonry, I don't think that's a ha-ha joke after you die. He just was like, I'm not going to say this until I die, and then I want you guys to just publicize it. So we have someone who is likely Kamala Harris's great uncle or uncle, who is explicitly saying that he's a Freemason. And now we have a woman who's about to be president of the United States. How does that make you feel? Like I said, we don't want to overwhelm you guys. Another important part of this process is we don't want to make
Hello. YouTube cannot be reached. What's going on here? What? We still connected, so what happened? What happened to the house connection, eh? Stop playing, biatch. Unless we restart this shit. Cause you're a motherfucking hater. Yeah, cunt. Sorry. And that's cunt like, I can't do this right now. Oh, cunt fabulous. Here we go, guys. Eyes are restarting. Eyes are restarting. Hit you like the big pizza pie, got some more. Yeah, baby. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, guys. It's connecting right now. See, when the hate is deep, this is what happens. It's so good. You know why it's so good? Because where there's a will, there is a way. Right? Where there is a way, there is a way. I was tell you this girl ain't trying to do that well, huh? Just because you see her name, what that mean? See what I mean? Can't keep a good dog down, wow, 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 wow. No, you can't keep a good dog down, wow, 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 wow. Sorry, houses. Sorry, houses. Come on, come on. Uh-oh, I might have to check on that box. What's going on here? Eyes against no receptions. Who knows? Who knows? Okay, eyes are gonna check the box. Eyes are looking for a con job. See, now I'm gonna go check on the connection. I'll be right back. See what haters gonna do there. Hey, what you gonna do? Haters. Alright, so let's don't do it like this. Watch this, guys. He's gonna do over here. Come on now. Come on now. There we go. Stinks is connects it. Oh my goody gosh, guys. This bites the head.
Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this solo video, we are looking at a pair of star-crossed kills. Because when two young folk saw people get in the way of their plans, well, that just wouldn't do. When a single mother did not like her daughter's new boyfriend, she kicked him out of the house. She got a friend to come and threaten him, you know, East Coast style, and then she even filed charges against him. You'd think that would stop him. It would not. The couple only saw one way out of this, but it's probably not what...
Oh no. Not you.
This old story takes us to just outside Sacramento, California, to a town called That's a good-ass name for a town. Does it live up to it? Yeah, actually. By all accounts, it does. It's a small but growing town with a very connected community, and it's lively. It's got a real spirit, and as the name suggests, it's a wealthy place nestled in the foothills of the Sierras. On one side you've Lake Tahoe, the national forests, the mountains. On the other side, the Central Valley. It was in that town, the year 2009, that Joanne Witt, 47 years old, and her 14-year-old daughter, Tyler Witt, lived. In a nice house just sitting off Folsom Lake, on the northern side of town. Joanne was smart as a whip, came from a big family that were well-to-do, and Joanne worked as a civil engineer for the county. Her young daughter, Tyler, went to Oak Ridge High School. And things were... okay. See, it was just Joanne and Tyler. The dad, he was never in the picture at all. And things were rocky between them at best. Always had been. Joanne always wanted a child, not so much a partner. And so she was so happy to be raising Tyler by herself, and she always had the support of her own family close by. Joanne was very close with her parents, Norb and Judy, But when Tyler was 5 years old, she was taken from Joanne after Joanne hit her. And as she grew, Tyler would repeatedly run away from home, crash with friends, that sort of thing. They did not get on well. CPS would be called to the home a number of times. It seems weirdly that Tyler would call 911, pretending to be her own mother, Joanne, saying that her daughter was beating her.
911. Excuse me, I need to report vandalism and physical abuse. When did this happen? My daughter, Tyler Witt, has physically assaulted me and she's vandalizing my home. Where is she right now? She's upstairs. Do you need to go to a safe place? No, I can go outside. How old is your daughter? She's 14. Did she assault you also? Yes, she did.
Some weird shit. Then during that same call, Joanne, the real Joanne, came on the line and she in fact was injured. Tyler was beating up her mother, then calling 911, pretending to be her mother to get rid of herself.
Hello? Yes? That was my daughter. Go ahead, finish the report and send me to jail. Is her name Joanne? Are you safe? Okay. Are you injured at all? Okay.
It seems Joanne was trying to do everything she could for her daughter, to support her, to love her. Sometimes she obviously went a little bit too far, but she just wanted the best for her, and she didn't want her to leave. She didn't want to, her to be taken away. She gave Tyler everything. There were only the two of them in this massive 5-bedroom house with a pool. They had vacations, piano lessons, horseback riding, you name it. But nothing worked. Everything was just a band-aid for their relationship. It was June 15th, 2009, a Monday, that Joanne's boss could not get through to her. Joanne hadn't showed up for work and calls to her were just like ringing out. And the thing was, Joanne had been a no-show at work the Friday before also. When she didn't show up for work on Friday, they thought, okay, maybe she's off doing things, with her daughter or whatever. But then the weekend passes and she's a no-show on Monday also. Calls are going nowhere. They even went, knocked on her door. The house was dead quiet. Something was off. So her boss called her parents, Norb and Judy, who had just returned from traveling the country in an RV. Her parents said, we're not too far away, we'll go check on it, we have a key to enter the house. But Judy's boss said, I'm one step ahead, I've already called the cops just to do a welfare check and just to be sure, because, if the parents haven't heard anything else, then something's definitely weird. Outside the home, police didn't see anything strange. Her car was in her garage, and they eventually gained entry. Walking around, nothing strange or out of place. That was until they reached the master bedroom. Lying half on the bed, under the sheet, was a body, and the sheet was blood red. It was Joanne. She had been stabbed to death with a very large gaping injury to her neck and defensive wounds on her hands and fingers. It looked like she had been butchered. In the house, there was no sign of Tyler at all. And thinking back to some reports Joanne had made just previously, they began to think that Tyler may have been kidnapped from the home. From how the scene looked and the fact that Joanne hadn't shown up to work on Friday, she had been killed and Tyler had been taken days ago. They were a good few steps behind on this case.
I started the Completed out of my love for prints and has snowballed into a stationery brand. Fair helps us connect with businesses that align with that.
See, 5 days earlier, Joanne had reported the statutory rape of her 14-year-old daughter, Tyler, by a 19-year-old fella named Stephen Culver. In fact, it seemed like, from the scene, Joanne had filed those charges the day before she was murdered.
Well, we know that this is a true bombshell in what El Dorado County investigators were calling a true murder mystery yesterday. Just minutes ago here at the Sheriff's Department, they did confirm indeed that a 14-year-old girl and her boyfriend are the prime suspects in the murder of a 45-year-old mother in El Dorado Hills. In fact, just minutes ago, they released photos of the two who are now wanted. There are arrest warrants for these two teenagers now. On the right, that is the daughter, 14-year-old Tyler Marie Witt. According to sheriff's deputies, her boyfriend is 19-year-old Stephen Paul Culver. He also goes by the alias of Boston. They say they have reason to believe they are now in the Bay Area and that they have changed their appearance.
19-year-old Stephen Culver and 14-year-old Tyler Witt had met about 6 months before all of this, back in January 2009. They had been introduced at a local coffee shop by a mutual friend, and they hit it off. See, they were both part of the, like, no one understands me, man, local goth, baggy jeans, dyed black, Jack Skellington stuff, that local scene. Stephen, who went by Boston, everybody just called him Boston because, the reason they called him Boston is because he had a childhood speech impediment, which made him sound like he was from Boston, which, alright. He had just graduated from the same high school Tyler was now attending, and they bonded over this and that, music, anime, school, all that. Stephen was now attending a local college, and he was working at a restaurant, and he was trying to impress girls which were clearly way too young for him. He also dreamed of being a maths teacher, which, I mean, from his interest in women, it's a good thing yeah, that didn't happen. They quickly became, inseparable. Tyler, the impressionable young girl. Stephen, well, he sucks. It was in March, though, that their relationship became physical. That is when I should have been fun. See, Stephen lived in town with his dad, but in April, Stephen's dad was selling the house and he was getting out of state. He was up and at him, right? But Stephen, he worked in town, he was studying in town, and his new girlfriend, who was, again, waiting for him, was in town, so Stephen didn't want to leave. So Tyler had a brilliant idea she took to her mother, Joanne. She said, we have this big 5-bedroom house. How about we make it a little bit extra scarol? We rent out one of the rooms to this guy I know named Stephen Culver. Now, of course, when Tyler came up with this whole idea, she told her mother that, Stephen, he's just more like a brother, he's just a friend. In fact, he's actually gay. So you don't have to worry about, anything weird going on here at all. And so Joanne said, yeah, and she did not suspect a thing. So now you had Stephen living with his lover and paying his lover's mother $500 a month for the privilege of being able to do so. This is disturbing as shit already, and it will not end well. When he moved in, though, Stephen seemed like a good influence on Tyler. She had stopped running away. The mom and daughter didn't fight so much. He helped her with school. But, of course, as you can imagine, as soon as Joanne was out of the room, or as soon as she was out of the house, well, they were obsessed with each other. Star-crossed lovers and all that young teenage shite. Although, Stephen should be a bit old for this. They also did more than just, that. They smoked devil's lettuce together. They snorted devil's dander. They did pills together. One time, Joanna even found Stephen's little stash of drugs in the house. Joanna was obviously pretty pissed off that this was in the same house as her young teenage daughter and the fact that he would be doing it under her roof. But Stephen managed to convince Joanne that the drugs she had found, his drugs, were, just minding them for a friend, definitely not mine. And Joanne, just so happy with how peaceful things seemed in the house, she was like, alright, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. However, the very next day after she discovered drugs in her house, Joanne just so happened to come home from work early. She came into the house. She was like, Tyler, she no answer. She was looking for Tyler. She went up to Tyler's room, opened the door. Tyler was not in her bedroom, nor in the living room or dining room or anywhere else. So then, Joanne went to Stephen's room. She knocked on the door, and as she did, she heard rummaging coming from inside Stephen's room. Then, Stephen opened the door. He was only in his underwear. Joanne thought, oh, hell no. She barged in, and then inside the closet in Stephen's room, she opened the door. Tyler was in there. Tyler was naked. Joanne was shocked and pissed. She was so stunned that later that same day she ordered Stephen into the car with her and they took a ride. And she openly asked him what was going on between the two of them. He admitted their relationship to her. He admitted that it was wrong and that it was illegal. And so Joanne said, well, you're 19, she's 14. If you stop seeing her and get the hell out of my house, I won't press charges. Stephen, he agreed to leave. And the very next day, 2 of Joanne's friends from work, they came over and they gave Stephen the old, what are you doing with this girl who's way too young for you? And if you don't stop,
that's a real
East Coast style. We're going to sort you out East Coast style, which sleep with the fishes or whatever. They're going to cook him in a big load of pasta. Who knows what that means? But guess what? Stephen did not end it. He crashed with a friend, and every time Joanne left the house, or it was late and she was asleep, Stephen would sneak over. Then one day in early June, Joanne found Tyler's diary, and she was a very good little writer. She wrote down everything, including the sexual liaisons they had, what they did together. how they were in love with each other.
Collaboration is smoother than ever.
That they wanted to get married, but most of all, they needed to get Joanne out of the picture so they could be together. Joanne gave this to the police as proof of their sexual relationship, told police about finding Tyler hiding in his bedroom, and then proceeded to file charges against Stephen Culver for statutory rape.
I walked upstairs, saw that my daughter's door was open. She's nowhere in the house, and his door is closed and he's in his room. I knocked on the door, and I heard the shuffling inside. So I opened up the door, and there's my daughter holding a top, naked like this.
This was on June 10th. This could be charged as either a... Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this solo video, when a young couple decided to just get away, to leave everything, to leave their small town life and its small town ways, little did they know that just moments into their brand new life, it would end in the most horrifying of ways. They encountered a monster who, even during my own research, and you know, for those of you who've been here for a while, I've covered a lot of monsters, and this one even kept me up at night just thinking about him, because he's a little bit scary. So many urban legends start right with this guy. He gave me a lot of sleepless nights, which I'm going to pass on to you. You're welcome. Please subscribe if this kind of thing, mysteries, crime, spooky, if my kind of thing is also your kind of thing. Now, let's give it a go. Just to the southeast of Houston lies a little area, well, back when this story takes place, a little area called Pasadena, Texas. These days, about 150,000 people live there. Back though, in 1990, it was just a little more than 100,000. It's a suburb of the big city, and it's a tight-knit community. You know, it's quiet, it's calm, and it's within sight of all those refineries that dot the area between Houston and Galveston. The funnest fact you can learn about Pasadena, Texas, and when I say funnest, I mean most horrible, of course, is that it was home to one of the most infamous serial killers in history, Dean Corll, who, along with his two teenage accomplices, murdered a minimum of 28 teenage boys between 1970 and 1973. This was going on between Houston and Pasadena. He lived in Pasadena, so like a bit of a history, this city, sorry Pasadenians who are watching this. And of course, this is all before I get into the main story of this video, but also Pasadena is home to one of the most infamous murders in history. When, in 1974, Ronald O'Brien, while taking his son and his son's friends trick-or-treating at Halloween, gave his own son poisoned candy. Cyanide-laced pixie sticks. Yeah, that's where the urban legend of poisoned candy comes from, right here in Pasadena, Texas. His own son, Timothy, passed away quickly, and of course, as you can imagine, this raised huge fears in the community of Pasadena, like the urban legend goes, right? Somebody's handing out poison-laced candy to their children. All of the parents in the city freaking out. However, the police soon became suspicious of old Ronnie boy over here, and his story of how his son got the death sticks. When during the investigation they discovered nobody in the community was actually handing out pixie sticks, and when Ronald took the police to the house where he supposedly got the candy, and the kids got the deadly candy, well, the person who lived there, the person who had allegedly given them the pixie sticks, he had an alibi. He was an air traffic controller, and 200 people could confirm he was in work Halloween night. It was also learned that Ronald over here, in today's money, he was over $600,000 in debt, and he could not hold a job. He had like over 20 in the previous 10 years. And it was also learned that he had, for his children, some good old...
And then the fathers took the children trick-or-treating. Bates said O'Brien went to one house where no one appeared to be home, and after the children had scampered ahead to the next house, O'Brien came off the front porch carrying the pixie sticks.
He was arrested, tried, and convicted, and at the end of which he was sentenced to death, a sentence carried out on March 31st, 1984. So, Pasadena, quite a dark history already. It was here in 1990 that 14-year-old Regina K. Walters grew up. Regina was the daughter of Jerry Walters and Caroline Simpson, and she was the youngest of 3 children. She had an older sister, Diana, and an older brother, Brian. Now, tragically, though, her older sister, Diana, would pass away at only age 12, if you can believe that. Pass away by, her own hand. Before she took her own life, she actually recorded a message on tape recorder to be left, to be found, and it ended with a message to her parents saying, "I hate you forever." Now, growing up, Regina dreamed of getting away from Texas, getting away from this, constant industrial atmosphere that was baked into the town, getting away from the people she saw everybody around her turn into and grow into. She didn't want to be one of them. She wanted to be something else. She wanted an adventure, to see America, maybe even the world, and she thought she had met the man who would take her with him. His name was Ricky Jones, and he was a few years older than Regina. He was 18, but by all accounts, they were very much in love with each other. It was teen love, both of them. It was their first all-consuming, passionate love. They'd spend all day talking on all night, just talking about getting away from Pasadena and going out to either Mexico or out west to California. Starting fresh, just the two of them. That was all they needed. What they wanted to be, they didn't know, but they wanted to find it, and they knew they wouldn't find it here. When in Regina's house, all they found was grief since Diana's passing. Ricky, a little older than Regina, but very soft-spoken, a quiet, kind-hearted fella who kept to himself. He was ready to go. He had finished school, and so he promised to always take care of Regina. Now, though, the idea of going, well, it might not end well for old Ricky here, because he was actually on probation when they were making these plans to just up sticks and get out of town. He's actually on probation for theft, which means you can't exactly leave. And so, in secret, they packed their bags and they ready to sprint away into the night. Regina, she lived with her mother as her parents had split up, but both still lived in Pasadena. And so a lot of time, Regina would divide her time between the two places. They'd split up, shortly after their oldest daughter, Diana, had taken her own life. I mean, as you can imagine, that's quite something to be told after a 12-year-old, goes out that way and the final word.
Work.
No matter who you are, there are times it can be tough to be yourself when you have severe asthma.
Words are, "I hate you forever." This was something her parents, her family, Regina herself, they could never get over. And so that was also one of the big reasons why Regina just wanted to get away. Don't think I could blame her. Regina Walters was last seen on February 3rd, 1990 in her mother's apartment. The next morning, her mother, went into Regina's room. "How are you, Regina?" She was not there. Empty room. She sees clothing is missing, that basically she sees all the signs of somebody having ran away. Ricky and Regina had left together. They had ran for the highway. See, one problem that they both had, Ricky and Regina had was, well, Ricky didn't have a car, neither did Regina. They didn't drive. So with only their backpacks on their bags, it was hoof it and tum it till they got to where, they needed to go, where they wanted to go, but they hadn't even decided in their own head. They just anywhere but here. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be exciting. But in the meantime, of course, her mother Carolyn had woke to find Regina gone. Looking around the house, she can't find her. She goes into Brian's room, asks him. He hasn't seen her. She goes then calls Jerry, who lived in town. Her husband, Jerry Walters. No, she's not there. Then Caroline quickly goes to the Pasadena Police Department to report her 14-year-old daughter missing to the police. That was on February 4th, 1990, when she had last been seen the day before. An officer was assigned to this missing teen's case, and the usual scale, usual story. You got the flyers, missing persons posters, police going around town in their cruisers looking to see if they can find her. They can see anything, or if anybody else has seen anything. Soon, though, a ring came in, right? Regina had been spotted near the highway in the company of another older teen fella. And so, Regina's family and the friends, they knew full well about Ricky, and so they put 2 and 2 together. It was pretty obvious what was happening. Their assumption was in reality. They had ran away together. People were not happy, of course. Even though Ricky was always described as a nice guy, quiet, just kind of kept to himself. I mean, in fairness, Regina was too young for him. He was 18, she was 14. So at the same time, he was an adult who had ran away with a minor. People were thinking, this lad, he's stolen a child. Ricky and Regina ran. They tummed it. And eventually, going along the highway, they got lucky, and a truck came up, saw them, honked the horn, slowed down, and allowed them to leg it to catch up. And lucky for them, it was room enough for 2. Driver was this middle-aged guy. He looked fairly harmless. He had glasses on, his hair was slightly receding, he was lanky, but he was wearing like a shirt, trousers, very, clean. The cabin was meticulously clean, smelled good. His clothes had been freshly ironed and pressed. Basically, he looked like one of your dad's co-workers from the office. He opened the door, introduced himself as Dusty, let them in, and off they went along the highway. They knew people were looking for them at this stage. They knew they would get in serious trouble if they got caught, but they didn't care. They just wanted to get away and start fresh, away from everything they were leaving behind. Ricky himself, he'd grown up in foster care. He'd been removed from his own parents at a very young age. He had family, all the way over in Indianapolis. So he didn't really have the ties that Regina had, and the ties that Regina had, they were bringing her down, and she just wanted to cut them. That was what they knew. But what they didn't know was that the truck they had just gotten into had a secret compartment in the back, just behind the cabin. That was a torture chamber. And the driver, Dusty, already had a long list of victims. It was over a month after Regina and Ricky were last seen on March 17th, 1990, that Regina's father, Jerry, he got a ring. Now, Jerry, when the phone was ringing, assumed it must have been a friend or somebody he knew. See, Jerry's number was actually unlisted. Even some of his best friends didn't know his phone number, so he was obviously then quite shocked when he picked up the phone and there was a voice on the other end of the line that he did not recognize. The man asked immediately, first saying, "Am I speaking with Regina Walters' father?" And Jerry drops everything, right? Because he's been looking for his daughter for over a month now with zero leads and zero tips since, they had been seen near the highway. So he drops everything and is like, yes, this is he. What do you know? Tell me, what do you know about my missing girl? The man said he knew where Regina was. So Jerry, jumping for joy at this point. Amazing. But his next sentence poured ice water on Jerry's stomach. He said, "I cut her hair. She's got short hair now. I left her in a barn loft." Jerry asked, "Is she still alive?" And then the line went dead. Jerry tried calling back, but the number was unavailable, and then he went to the Pasadena police to report what had just happened. There had been no news and sightings of either Ricky or Regina since they'd ran away together, so this was, although it could be bullshit, some news. However, the attitude of that call, well, sounds like shit news to be fair. The police, however, they got tape recorders. They gave one to Jerry and they gave one to Caroline, just in case this, whoever he is, he calls back again, they can record his messages. And in fact he did. He called back that night. This time he called Caroline. Now he was asking Caroline if they'd found her daughter, and he said she was in a barn loft, and there's only about 1 million of them. So then he says, "All right, I'll meet you in the morning at a convenience store near your home in Pasadena." Caroline went there first thing the next morning, and she's waiting in her car outside this convenience store. Only thing was she had told the police, and a police cruiser had parked nearby. So nobody showed up. Now, whether nobody showed up because this caller was actually bullshit, or because they'd seen the police car nearby, nobody knows.
Certainty starts here with the original equipment parts from GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco that continuously evolve to meet.
Maybe nobody was ever going to show up regardless. That was, though, until he called again, arranging another meeting. Now, this time there was no police car, or rather, the police were there, but they were in an unmarked car parked nearby, but again, no show. Caroline waited and waited and waited for nothing. The mysterious caller then called her yet again. In fact, he would call her multiple times over the next couple of weeks, and the police would always, be trying to trace these calls from wherever this mysterious person was, because it was always the same voice. Now, a lot of times you wouldn't stay on the line long enough to be traced. Other times, though, it would be traced back to Oklahoma City or up to Illinois, or then right beside her house. The calls were coming from basically all around Texas and the Midwest. On the phone, who's basically said nonsense, shouting, sometimes trying to arrange another meetup, sometimes sexual things. But then, after about 2 weeks of these calls coming in, they abruptly stopped in April. Ricky and Regina have been missing for 2 months now, with zero word other than this crazy son of a bitch who's calling in, saying all sorts of weird ass shit. Who knows if he even knew anything about what really happened to Ricky and Regina. Maybe he was just some crazy see you next Tuesday who was getting a chub off, torturing a missing girl's parents. But the fact that he was able to call Jerry's number, which was an unlisted number, did strike people as odd. How would he have gotten that number? Unless he had gotten it from Regina herself. But the thing of it, he was a crazy son of a bitch who, see you next Tuesday, he was getting his rocks off. by torturing a missing girl's parents. He was telling the truth. He was the reason Ricky and Regina had gone missing. His name was Robert Benjamin Rhodes, and he was, / is, because he's still soaking air to this day, probably one of the scariest killers you've ever, or perhaps never, heard of. But I guarantee you've seen this picture. This picture is of Regina Walters, and it was taken just moments before he murdered her. He began calling her parents shortly after taking this photograph. He had kept her alive for over a month. Robert Rhodes was a truck driver, very unimaginative considering his name, but also very imaginative by what the things he did to his victims. This will get dark. Just heads up. You know me, I don't really like getting into the nitty-gritty of violence and all that sort of thing, but even just like glossing over a surface level of what he literally did, yeah. So let's go back and begin right at the thing they call the beginning, and start with Robert Shithead Rhodes himself. But before I continue, let me ask you this, hot stuff. Do you ever get just gosh dang frustrated when you're looking at your bills that are coming in every month? You get an email saying, thanks for renewing your subscription. You're welcome. Subscription I didn't want renewed because I signed up for you once and then totally forgot about you, and then months later you're still charging me because I forgot to cancel. You're still taking my buckaroos. Fantastic. I'll cancel it later. It's a whole thing, and to be honest with you, I've probably forgotten my login password already. But you know, I could use a little service that would take care of all that for mission. Listen, in this economy, we're all just trying to put a few more pennies away every month. Scully needs bones. Well, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you manage bills, cancel subscriptions, and saves you money. I'm not great with money because I'm a storyteller. Letters and stuff. Numbers, no thanks. Which is why having something like Rocket Money, which helps me just plan out everything in incredibly clear language, it makes it so incredibly helpful. For example, this guy, I'm using Rocket Money to cancel subscriptions. Just a few taps. Be Gone thing I signed up for probably years ago and then forgot to cancel, and you're still taking my money. Or you can even have them try to lower your bills for you. Just upload a photo of your bill, and by tapping a few buttons, Rocket Money will negotiate your bills for you. From internet service to cable and phone bills. I'm full sure I'm being ripped off by my internet company. Or should I say I was? Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year when they use all the features, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. So to save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/thatchapter or click the link in the description to get started for free. You can also unlock even more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/thatchapter to get started for free. Thank you so much to Rocket Money for supporting and sponsoring That Chapter. Now let's make like a rocket and Robert Rhodes was born in November 1945 in the city of Council Bluffs, Iowa. Council Bluffs sits just across the Missouri River from Omaha. Back when he was just knee-high to Adam's ballsack, or wherever that saying goes. Back then, a population of about 40,000 people. But, you know, soon after that, when Robert was growing up, it would experience that big old post-war baby boom, and the population would grow exponentially. Speaking of post-war, Robert's dad was actually in the military. He was in the army and he was stationed in West Germany. This was at the time of Robert's birth, so for the early years of Robert's life, he was actually raised by his mama, Faye Rhodes. She herself raised Robert and his siblings in the city of Council Bluffs. It seems like they grew up with a nice, normal family. You know, the kind of things you see in all serial killers, child Roonies, was not there. Nice, loving family in this nice, good old boy city. Seems like he was close with his mother, though, you know, not in that, like, weird. No, he wasn't too close, if you know what I mean. But this nice, normal family of the Rhodes, it went off-road. Right when Daddy Ben Rhodes returned from Europe after he was discharged from the army. He did, however, put this in your pipe and smoke it, come home like he was still fighting the Nazis in his own home. He had quite a temper, and he wasn't shy, you know, with the fists. So the entire home life was disturbed by probably a fairly already disturbed Daddy-O. Once home, he got a job as a firefighter, and, you know, in the public's eye at least, he was fairly respected. You know, he just got home fighting a war in Europe, and now he was back home in his city that was on the rise. But of course, people, you know, outside the Rhodes' front door didn't really know what went on behind it. But Robert always looked up to his dad as a hero, even when sometimes he'd be on the end of his dad's cuisine du jour.
To get me out of my own head, I need people around me. People who, when they see me slipping, say, "You..."
Which was a knuckle sandwich. And during all of this, Robert and his siblings were growing up fairly normal. They went to the local elementary, middle, and high schools, and he was a decent student. He had friends, he played sports, he was in the singing clubs. Pretty regular so far, though he did like bounce off the police once or twice while growing up, once at 16 and once at 18, but for fairly minor offences.
If you find yourself around somebody like that, eventually they're gonna bring you down. Find ways to get away from them. Find ways to surround yourself around people that mean you well. Stay away from haters. I'm telling you guys, run. I do every day.
Once was for tampering with a vehicle, another time he just got into a fight. And, but nothing worrisome at this stage. Fairly normal, lads being lads kind of stuff. However, it was after a clean and non-serial killery childhood that things took a dark turn for Robert Ben Rhodes. Right when he was just about to graduate high school, he was about 18 years of age at this point. It was the actions of his father, Ben Rhodes, that would turn this pretty, average trajectory that Robert Rhodes was on and just take a nosedive. All the way down to Nopesville. See, when Robert was 18, his father was arrested for sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl. Then, after posting bail, he was arrested a few months later for doing it again. He was arrested, made bail once again, but before his could come to trial, he decided to eat a revolver and diarrhea bullets at the back of his skull. So as you can imagine, this would have a profound effect on Robert. His dad turned out to be a monster who had ended it all. A switch in Robert, gun got flicked. He hadn't figured all that out yet though, so to get away from all the rumors and whispers of finger pointing in the small town of Council Bluffs, he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. Robert Rhodes followed in Ben Rhodes' footsteps, and he himself joined the military. He joined the Marines. Following his father's footsteps he did, down the staircase to hell. However, it was 3 years into his service in the Marines that he would be dishonorably discharged. He was based on the East Coast and he was caught red-handed during a robbery. So, out you get. He was out with his arse after that. It seems like he really did have this urge to kind of act out after his father's death, and I guess what he thought would be the military, which would kind of keep him in line, it did the opposite of that, and he just got worse and worse and worse. Over the next few years, Robert kind of sort of bounced around from job to job, never really finding his place. I mean, his place was supposed to be the military, but he was out in his arse. He didn't have an arse in his trousers after what they did to him. So eventually he moved back home to Council Bluffs, moved back into his family home. The whispers and the finger pointing hadn't stopped about old Daddy-O, who, Ben Rhodes had been a hero in the war. He'd been a firefighter and turned out, so everybody knew him and knew what he had done and then what he'd done to himself. So the whispers and finger pointing back in Council Bluffs hadn't stopped, but Robert still went back. He actually ended up meeting a woman there and marrying. And while he was there, he also went to college and he wanted to, upskill himself. At this point, he didn't really know what was ahead of him, but he did know one thing about himself at this point. He liked violence, and he had some urges that he really, hot diggity dog, just couldn't kind of help himself from acting out on. And this wasn't like, into the deep end. This was like a toe in first, and then maybe little foot, and then jumping in cock first. It was around 1970 that Robert decided he couldn't do this anymore. He quit Council Bluffs for good, he quit college, he quit his wife and his son, who he had. He divorced them all, and he left, never to return. They dodged a bullet, let me tell you. He tried to become a cop, but he failed the entrance exam, and he bounced from one job to another. He worked in warehouses, in stores, in restaurants, all that kind of stuff before ending up in Houston 73. He ended up as a truck driver, and he loved being a truck driver. We will get to that. Another thing Robert discovered is that he was, BDSM, right? That was the thing he thought BDSM was the dog's bollocks, right? It was his favorite thing in the world. He jumped cock first into the local burgeoning BDSM swingers community in Houston, Texas. Madford, he got into it more and more. And I mean, the thing about BDSM is that you got the whips and the chains and all that stuff, but it is consensual. Two parties agreeing are both into it and they can stop whenever they want. It's completely consensual. Now Robert was into the whips and chains. Consensual part though, he could kind of do without. Robert would marry again in Houston, unknown what her name was, but he really got off on watching her suffer. One time when she was in hospital with lupus, he was rocking it 24/7. She too would go on to say he was abusive but torturing people. That was his cup of tea. He really found that out about himself. I guess he had a lot more in common with his dad than he thought originally. Here's a picture of him in his getup. Now, this picture is actually from a Halloween party he attended with his wife. But I mean, this may as well not be, because that was his gear, he didn't need to buy shit. His nickname was even Whips and Chains. His second marriage would end in divorce, yet again, and then he would meet his third and final wife. This was in the early 80s, and her name was Deborah Davis. They met at a bar, and the night they met, Robert was actually dressed as an airline pilot. Apparently he thought that was the best way to meet women, was just lie to them and just dress up as a job you don't have. I mean, I suppose a truck driver is kind of like an airline pilot on the roads. But he introduced himself, you know, giving a fake name. He said his name was Dusty, and he flies planes all around the world. Nice to meet you. Probably not a bad scam. I mean, it's a shitty scam, but it probably did work. They began dating, and in fact, it would be months before she realized he was not, in fact, an airline pilot. He was described as charming and intelligent, though cunning was the word that was used a lot when describing Robert Rhodes, which that was a very different connotation to intelligent. Their relationship was quite sweet to begin, and though, of course, you know, when he told her he wasn't really an airline pilot, he was a truck driver, and his name wasn't Dusty, it was Robert, she was taken aback, obviously. The DA would decide, but regardless would likely lead to prison time for Stephen. When Tyler was informed of this, she was distraught. Not her amazing Stephen, no, not him.
This gentleman, he goes by Boston?
Yeah.
How would you describe your and Boston's relationship?
He was like a big brother to me, but we were very close friends.
Then what did it turn into?
I started to have feelings for him, and then kind of clicked in my head, oh my God, he's 5 years older than me.
Okay. Your mom said that she caught you and him in his room and you were undressed?
No.
Never happened?
No. He's like a big brother to me.
She continued to deny to the police when questioned, as did Stephen.
What's your relationship with her?
She's like a sister to me. I understand she's 14. I understand all this. I'm very, very scared at the moment.
You can be honest, because it'll look a lot better if you just come out clean.
And they decided they were going to run away together. The plan? They were going to run away to San Francisco together and there end their own lives by eating rat poison. But before they would do that, well, the very next night when Joanne fell asleep, Tyler let Stephen into the house one final time. And one of them was carrying a knife. They felt betrayed by Joanne, and so even though they planned to end their own lives, they wouldn't let Joanne continue with hers. She wouldn't stop them now, even though she had already filed charges against Stephen and they had already planned to end their own. This doesn't make any sense. I don't get it at all, but yeah, that was the plan. Now, after Joanne's body was found, the police didn't know how involved Tyler was. They thought, because she was so young, that Stephen had coerced her into the sexual relationship, killed Joanne when discovered, and then kidnapped Tyler. Not quite. An APB was put out for the young couple, and the media circus began in El Dorado Hills. The morning of June 12th, Stephen and Tyler left the Witt house for the final time. They then went to Stephen's dad's house. It was empty because he was selling it, and they burned all their clothes. They then met up with some friends and hung out with friends for the day, and the friends would later say, not a bother on them. They were happy out. Some crack that day. They then dyed their hair black, and after doing some more drugs, they showed one of the friends the bloody knife they'd used to murder Joanne. They then fled to San Francisco. This was Friday. Joanne wasn't discovered till Monday. Now, in San Francisco, things didn't exactly go according to plan. So, see, they checked into the Holiday Inn in downtown San Francisco. They did some sightseeing around the city, because, I mean, you know, you may as well. Then they went into their hotel room, and they had a lot of rat poison. They mixed it in with red velvet cake they had, and then they started gobbling it up. But red velvet cake is, like, really heavy. You know, you can't really eat too much of it, so it turns out they just didn't eat enough of it to die. Because of they didn't eat enough to poison, rather than just, like, I don't know, swallow the poison some other way. Then they were like, okay, how about we slit our wrists? Stephen was not a fan of that one. He's like, oh, it's kind of sore. Jump off the roof. Tyler, she was afraid of heights. Man, can't get out of here right here. So instead, they just kind of, like, hung out for a bit. Then, walking the streets one day, a cop spotted them and recognized them from the bulletin. Stephen and Tyler were soon arrested while changing clothes behind a dumpster at a mall. Not exactly this whole romantic, epic thing I guess they had envisioned. Nope. Got arrested while changing her clothes in a piss-smelling alleyway behind a dumpster.
Good afternoon, I'm Adrienne Bankert. We begin with breaking news in the El Dorado Hills murder mystery. Law enforcement in the Bay Area have arrested the 2 teenage murder suspects. Authorities in San Bruno, that's south of San Francisco, took them into custody earlier this morning.
When questioned, Tyler had no idea her mother was dead. You gotta be shitting me.
What happened?
They tried to run away. Miss Austin decided that we didn't want to live there anymore and decided to just go down to San Francisco to be together. I was a little upset just because my mom, she wanted me to talk to a detective about something Austin had did that he didn't, and I didn't want to talk to him.
Was this in reference to the diary?
Yeah.
And you were saying that whatever was being alleged was incorrect, and you and your mom were arguing about that?
Yeah.
Let's get down to the point here. Why are you here?
They tried to run away.
Because you tried to run away.
What other reasons?
Been arrested for murder.
What? Who did I murder?
Your mother. We don't need to play this. We already know that you know that your mother's dead.
Give me that.
You pull it together. Just a moment. Talk to me about your mother.
It's not true. Give me that. I wanted an attorney and what you got. How dare you?
You want an attorney and you want me gone. Okay. That we can do. And unfortunately, we can't talk to you again. Good luck.
Stephen was charged with first-degree murder. Tyler, they didn't know yet the level of her involvement. Didn't take long to figure it out, though. And Tyler was charged with first-degree murder and then charged as an adult. But who had dealt the blow? Well, DNA was found on Joanne's body. Male DNA. But it was minuscule. It seems it wasn't enough to determine if it was in fact Stephen's DNA. Tyler cut a deal with the prosecution and agreed to testify against Stephen, and in return, her charge would be downgraded from first-degree murder to second-degree murder.
Special circumstances in the killing of her own mother, Joanne Witt. Witt and Culver are charged with killing Joanne Witt in her El Dorado Hills home sometime between June 11th and 12th, 2009. Prosecutors say that Joanne was upset about her daughter's sexual relationship with the older Culver and had turned over evidence to the sheriff's department.
That would be the difference of 25 years to life or 15 years in prison, which, I mean, turns out I guess she didn't like him that much after all. And so Stephen's trial began in May 2011. The prosecution said that Tyler had drugged her mom and then let Stephen in. He went into Joanne's room. Tyler stayed outside with her fingers pressed into her ears, humming to herself. And he later came out sometime later, covered in blood, with a single tear streaming down his face. That's Tyler's exact words, by the way. He was covered in blood with a single tear. Be sure those aren't My Chemical Romance lyrics. The prosecution pushed that Stephen would be the one in jail due to the charges Joanne was filing. He was the older one, the more mature one, the one who, according to friends, enjoyed knives and enjoyed manipulating younger women. The defense, though, in turn attacked Tyler's mental state as she was, key witness for the prosecution. Or should I say, mental states? Because, get this, she was Tyler. She was an angel known as Alex, and she was a demon known as Toby, and each would take control of Tyler from time to time. It's fascinating stuff. Who was in control of Tyler that night, I wonder? You couldn't have better names than Alex, Toby, come on. Because when Stephen took the stand in his own defense, he said that when he arrived to the Witt house that night, Tyler was already covered in blood with a knife, saying she did it. My mom is gone forever.
Outside court, a surprise remark from another friend of Culver's who took the stand late this afternoon. Listen to what Dylan Deutsch told KCRA3 in an exclusive interview.
I've known Tyler Witt for a long time, and I have a feeling that she has more of a part in it than she's saying. I think she's guilty, to be honest. I think she did it, yeah.
Tyler was saying Stephen had come over and he had murdered her mom. Stephen was saying he did go over, but the mom was already dead by Tyler's hand.
Since the beginning, he has maintained his innocence, and then Friday afternoon, she pled guilty to murdering her mother. And what young girl would plead guilty to murdering her mother if she didn't do it?
Culver's attorney says he was a victim of wits too, and revealed for the first time publicly his defense.
In a sense, yes. My position is that he came to the house after the fact. That's our position. The homicide had already occurred before he got there.
Witt will now testify against Culver.
The defense also found a story in Tyler's diary. Remember, she was a good little scribbler. And it was this short story from the twisted mind of Tyler Witt. And it was called The Killer and His Raven. The story was about a young man and his belle who they wanted to be together, but the mother was a real oppressive bitch and wouldn't let them be together. So at the end of the story, blah, 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 long story short, fast forward, they killed the mother. Sounds vaguely familiar. But I should say, the short story, The Killer and His Raven, it's set in medieval times. So completely different.
Culver's attorney also told the jury that after her mother banned her from seeing Culver anymore, Tyler Witt wrote, quote, "If my mom doesn't let me see Boston, I swear to God, I will kill her."
Her diary also expressed numerous times how she wanted Joanne gone. After 4 hours of deliberation, Stephen Boston Culver was found guilty of murder and special circumstances of lying in wait, use of a deadly weapon, and killing a witness. Now, it was relating to the statutory rape charge. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Stephen Culver had a dark side. He took a 14-year-old girl and turned her into a heavy drug user, sex addict, and murderer. May he rot in the hell he wrote so often about in his journals.
My hope is on the prison system, that the prison system will somehow create a slow and painful death. Young men like Mr. Culver are 5 times as likely to be attacked and brutalized in prison. And I actually find that to be a comforting statistic. They're 10 times as more likely to incur deadly sexual diseases.
I just hope he has good luck with his new friends in prison, and I hope they embrace him warmly.
Tyler Witt was sentenced to 15 years, as agreed with the prosecution. She was granted parole in August 2022. Whether the pair ever really intended to end their own lives, I think is debatable. I don't think they really did. I think it's probably more likely just some teen angst kind of bullshit. They just wanted it all. It was all consuming for them and be damned everybody else. Tyler and her mom didn't have a good relationship in the first place. And so Stephen came in, her grooming knight in shining armor. And once it looked like he might be gone, mom had to go. And then, of course, it comes to trial. Real consequences of, what they'd done. Because she clearly never gave a shit about her mother. But as soon as it was like, 25 years or 15 years... She was like, 15 years, yeah, actually, you know what, that guy kind of sucked, actually. Her own mother wasn't enough to get her to ditch him, but it turns out an extra 10 years in prison was. Thank you so much for watching. It really means the world to me. Hope you enjoyed this whole video, and yeah, you're listening to the next whole video. Be up in a couple of days, so please give it a go. But until then, please take care of each other. Please take care of yourselves, because I love you.
At least her mom dealt with it. No Culver there. And yes, guys, I'm 50 years old and I'm missing a suit. That's your neighbors all day. You hear me?
It. And I think the pocket gusset, and then we're done. Right? Yes.
Really? Come on.
Should I do the ghosties going? Only 6 hours away. Oh my goodness, you're gonna have a drive. And this gusset here, or should I do the rest vinyl? This, what all I have to keep open. It's just trial and error. Okay. I think we're good. That was totally my fault. I just need to not touch my phone. Okay. Yay, we'll give it just a second. Again, cutting out of Frank Jr., Sincerely Jen, altered a little bit. Okay, hi guys.
Hi.
All right, we're good? We're good. Okay, so here I go. This is my front pocket. For those of you who didn't see the 10-minute video before this, I explained the alterations that I'm doing on this front pocket. Sorry about that, guys. That was totally my fault. Yep. Hi, guys. All right, so here is my front pocket. It's going to be the wax canvas. I think I like that. Is that the only piece I'm doing the wax canvas? I could do, ooh, maybe the back pocket too. Let's do the back pocket with the wax canvas as well. There's a back slip pocket. All right, back, bottom. I think that's the piece I need. Yes. Talking about hair extensions and poof. I'm so sorry, guys. That was totally my fault. I'm like, oh, I pressed stop recording. We'll figure this out eventually. I'll become an old pro and we'll never remember that I used to have such a hard time with these cameras, right? Okay. All right, so this is going to be my back pocket of the bag here. So there's a back slip pocket on this bag. Sorry, guys. All right. All right, so that'll be my, those will be my only 2 wax canvas pieces, I guess. Oh, I wonder if I should do that front gusset and that top piece. Should I do vinyl or wax canvas? So I'm trying to decide. I'm mixing this with this green vinyl here. Whoops. So I've got this front pocket with the wax canvas. I've got this back pocket with the wax canvas. So Evelyn, I said on the other thread that I'm so excited that I got in for the November event. Oh, yay. That's awesome, Evelyn. So should I do wax canvas for this top piece here and this gusset here, or should I do the rest vinyl? I probably should do this, the wax canvas.
Yep.
Well, shoot. I think I'll do these 2 top pieces, the wax canvas too. All right. Let's do it. Well, Evelyn, we're just going to have a fun time. I'm glad you got in. It's going to be a party. For sure.
Just not a P. Diddy party.
Canvas. Yeah, I think it'll flow better if it's this canvas, huh, guys? We'll do it. All right, so that's the back top piece. This is the back bottom piece. And this is the front pocket piece. So now I need this top of the zipper piece here for the pocket. Okay. We got it. I just changed the blade in my rotary, and seriously, every time I do that, I'm like, oh, it makes a huge difference. Kind of funny. You're only 6 hours away. Oh my goodness, you're gonna have a drive, huh? Well, that's gonna be fun. Oops, I totally moved it. that's the top, the zipper part of the bag. All right, I think that's all for my wax canvas pieces. Although I think I'm gonna do my my crossbody strap connector. I think I'll do it the wax canvas because the vinyl I'm using is pretty thick and it might be too thick. Well, I mean, my machine could handle it, but it would probably go better if I did this. So we're just gonna go, I think they're 2 connectors. Crossbody, yep, okay. So these will be my crossbody strap connectors. Okay, beautiful. If I don't finish it on Saturday, are we able to finish on Sunday? Evelyn, I think it's just a one and done type of thing. Excuse me. Excuse me. You'd have to talk to Gabby from Wonderground about that. Yeah, that's something you could ask Gabby. Okay, so here is the stuff I'm gonna use. Hi, Judy. For everything else. Oh, so pretty. Okay, so for this, don't need any of those pieces with it. Hi, sister.
Sister.
Okay, so I enlarged my gusset and kind of wrote down my measurements, actually, so I'm gonna turn it this way and just cut out that part. So this is going to be the pocket gusset, which, yeah, I'm gonna do the vinyl. So,
See,
okay.
when they, it's so good when we, oh, they crazy, then bipolar.
Trim up the other side a little bit. About right there. So again, I'm altering this front pocket just a little bit. So this is going to go down and under my front zipper pocket. So my pocket gusset. I widened my pocket gusset to account for my bigger seam allowance on the bag that I'm doing. Okay. This vinyl, I believe, is Fabric Therapy's.
As you can imagine, but you know, she found herself falling head over heels in love with Robert. Then he started introducing her to the BDSM clubs and the swingers clubs and the whips and the chains and all that sort of thing. And they'd go to these houses where there'd be lots of people, you know, banging each other, and she would go into a room and find Robert having sex with somebody else, and she was a bit like, oh no. She would even witness him doing some illegal things. She was not keen on it.
I'm not a monster. I don't kill for fun. You're gonna be part of the masterpiece.
But he was pressuring her into it the entire time, forcing her to attend these little sessions. Things got extreme at times, and he would get even more and more violent with her. But then at the same time, he would just be constantly love-bombing her. They would eventually get married. One time, she came home to find a strange man in her house, and she was like, who's that? Robert said, listen, it's a sex slave I got for you. Lucky you. It's your lucky day. This is the house she shared with Robert and 3 kids of her own. And she wasn't into that at all. She did not appreciate this gift he'd given her. Talk about ungrateful. And of course, Robert would just get more and more abusive with her. List all the kinds of abuse he was doing. We don't need to get into it. But eventually, over the course of a couple of years, she would finally have enough. And she'd become estranged. Soon, though, Robert decided to take his violence out on the road. Where, listen, nobody's going to stop me out here. He loves trucking. He loves a lot of other things. Let's go book wild. This was in the late 80s. His MO, his modus operandi, look at me. was, well, he would be traveling all across America, on the highways all across America. So he could really be anywhere. And, I mean, the whole thing of, like, truck drivers being serial killers, he's kind of a big dog in that. So his MO would he be driving around and he would stop off at truck stops. And he would spot what he called lot lizards. Lot lizards, he didn't invent it. It's a term basically used for sex workers or maybe sometimes hitchhikers who will exchange sexual favors in exchange for going somewhere or for money or whatever. And sometimes he would agree to take them where they needed to go. He's go on, hop in the rig. For a time, the trip would be perfectly normal, and his passenger, you would think, hey, he's a nice guy, you know, he's dressed well, he smells good, he's charming, he's intelligent, he knows about the world, and he ain't a creepy-looking sumbitch. The cab was clean. This'll be fine. He'd even buy a lunch as he drove. So he'd be sitting there in the cabin, you know, munching away, wolfing in a burger and a Coca-Cola or whatever, thinking, this is great. However, it would be a little bit down the road as you got to that quiet space between cities that the conversation which had you know, been flown before, it would suddenly stop. Your questions would be met with silence. It would be like he was a million miles away, but also in your face at the very same time. The way a vicious dog wouldn't respond to your questions either. He'd shuffle in his seat a little, and the muscles that had been relaxed suddenly started tensing up, and the hairs on the back of your neck would stand up. Then he'd start talking about some dead girls he had read about in a newspaper who'd been found off a highway, or he had just heard about, that other truckers had been talking about. Maybe other dead girls who had been hitchhiking up until that point. He'd mentioned secret societies. Apparently Robert Rhodes was obsessed with secret societies, and he would mention one called the Laughing Death Society, which he said, you know what they do? They just laugh at death. I think the only member may have been Rob Rhodes. Then, when the truck was in a lonely spot, he would pull off and park the truck just off the road. He would then whip out a knife. He would tell you to get into the back of the cabin, or else this knife is going into you. In the back.
I just want us to take the time out to explain that all the scarves I make are donated to Hope for New York. They are then taken, washed, trimmed, and all necessary adjustments are made and then donated. Thank you so very, very, very much. Please do like and subscribe. Haters are gonna hate, but love is greater than all the hate. That's the truth.
His cabin, he had this little torture room set up. He had his little kit with chains and handcuffs and needles and all manner of toys that you can imagine, but you probably don't want to imagine. When the moment struck to either attach shackles after the woman had fallen asleep or at knife point, he then dragged them into the back of the cabin and would handcuff his victims to a bar bolted to the ceiling of the truck. Then, as he drove, he would take breaks whenever the mood struck him to assault his victims and torture them. He would whip them on the front and the back, puncture nipples and genitals with needles and pins, use and insert all manner of toys, all sorts of sex toys on them. He would force them to drink their own pee. This would go on for weeks. He would shave their pubic hair, which was a trophy of his. And the more they screamed, well, that's what he wanted. His assaults would only get more brutal the longer he held them. And once he got bored, it would almost always end in death, till he found his next victim at the next truck stop, and he would ready his black leather briefcase once again. One of these victims was 24-year-old Patricia. Candy was what she went by, Walsh, and her husband, 26-year-old Douglas Ziskowski. They were a couple newlyweds from Seattle, Washington, and they decided they wanted to attend a religious workshop in Georgia. They didn't drive or have a car, so hitchhiking was the plan. It would be an adventure. They were newlyweds, so think of this as a honeymoon. This was in November 1989, but it would be shortly after they set out on this great adventure that all contact with them stopped. Now this is 89, so it's not like getting cell phones or anything like that, but friends, relatives would just, you know, start to wonder after a couple weeks of not hearing from them, and then that wonder would turn to fear and dread. See, they actually made it to El Paso, Texas. Yeah, it took them a surprisingly long time to get there, over a month. They still had quite a bit to go. When, you know, well, then a nice friendly truck driver, listen, where you want to go to Georgia? Listen, I'm heading in that direction, be close enough, you know, you can find your own way there. Hop on in. And he was one guy and they were a couple, so it's not exactly like they were fearful of him attacking them or anything like that, you know what I mean? However, a few hours into their trip, his demeanor changed and he pulled over. This time, though, with two people, he whipped out a gun. He ordered the couple out of the truck into the woods, and then once they'd gotten quite a bit off the road, he shot Douglas in the head. Then, when Douglas was lying on the ground, he shot him more times in the head, and then he ordered Candy back into the truck. He kept her in the truck for over a week, by which time they got into Utah. Then, around then, he ordered her out of the truck into a remote spot, and he executed her. Another one of these women was 18-year-old Shanna Holtz. She was from California, and he met her in California, and she was looking for a ride to Fort Smith, Arkansas. Robert told her he was going to Texas, and she said, well, that's probably close enough. So in he gets. Once again, she thought he was charming and harmless. Just some trucker, you know, she's a young'un, just a trucker, you know, trying to do his good deed for the day after spotting this young hitchhiker milling around this truck stop. Once Shanna got into his truck, he pounced, attached a handcuff to each of her arms and each of her legs so she was spread eagle in the back of his cabin. After hours of torture, he would drive for a few hours, then more torture. When he had to make deliveries, he would turn up the radio in his truck to drown out the screams, though he would always insert a horse bridle around their neck and into their mouth so that they couldn't make much noise. Now, you know, serial killers, they'll often take trophies of their victims, whether it be clothing or sometimes bits of skin or teeth or jewelry or whatever. Robert Rhodes' thing was hair. When he had these women in his truck, he would often cut their hair short. He cut Shanna's hair short while he was kidnapping her just on the side of the highway. After keeping her in the truck for about a week, he began to sort of trust her. He would let her ride up in the front of the cabin, though she was always naked and like kept shackled. He actually kept her for 2 whole weeks entirely, when one time she managed to escape after he didn't, when a handcuffs he had put on her, he didn't put it on tight enough. And so she ran screaming towards a highway, just begging for help, flagging down any cars that could. And eventually she flagged him down and the police officers arrived not long after. So the police arrived and they spoke with her, and she told the officers that the person who kidnapped her and kept her for 2 weeks, his name was Dusty. And she eventually was able to give the police a description of the truck he drove and the company that he worked for, yada, yada, yada. Police went to the trucking company. They asked, do you have any truck drivers by the name of Dusty? And they said, well, yeah, his name is actually Robert Rhodes, but he often goes by Dusty. The police, they then brought him into a police lineup in the station. And, you know, had Robert Rhodes was there, and then there was a couple other guys, and then there was a two-way mirror, and then there was police officers, detectives, and Shanna Holtz. And Shanna picked out who's the guy who kept you in his truck. She looked at each person there, and she said he wasn't any of them. The police knew one of them was. They knew who it was. They knew that it was Ben Rhodes who had kept her. He matched all her descriptions. But looking at Shanna, they could just see the fear in her eyes that she just wouldn't identify him. In her mind, she was thinking if he ever got out, well, she already knows what he's capable of. So she thought he will kill her if he gets out. Just like Candy, and likely the countless women before her. Shanna had suffered the most unthinkable abuse while shackled in the back of Robert's cabin. Kept there for 2 weeks as they drove and drove and drove, consistently being subjected to the unimaginable. Traumatic wouldn't even begin to cover it. So she lied. To the police, said it wasn't him, and he was let go. The police, obviously, they couldn't pursue, but they noted all the details of Robert Benjamin Rhodes, you know, everything about him, his address, his company, everything, because they were fully sure this would not be the last time they would ever hear of him. They were bang on for Rhodes. If you can believe it, he would come up again. That would be in April 1990. This was in Casa Grande, Arizona. As you can see, he was getting around. We ain't done with the whole story yet. This was on April 1st, 1990. It was in the very wee hours of April 1st, 1990. An Arizona Highway Patrol officer spotted a truck parked off the interstate just outside the city limits, and its hazards were blinking away. So the officer is driving along. It's at very wee hours of the morning. He's thinking to himself, jeez, that truck's...
Alright guys, I'll make my scarves 5 feet by 9 rows. Usually takes me anywhere from 7 to 9 hours to make. Depends on my speed, depends on what's going on.
I wonder if everything's alright. You know, maybe I should just...
When they ain't no great, congratulate, because I finished a whole lot faster. But when there's head around, you know, you kind of have a tendency to procrastinate. Can't help that. Bad mojo, you know what I'm saying? I don't want none of that bad mojo, none of my scarves. Keep your bad mojo to yourself. I look like a 50-year-old to you? God has been good to me.
Why not just pop over, knock on the old cabin, see if everything's good here? So he pulled it, parked up behind the truck, started flashing the lights. Then he got out, whipped out a flashlight, was examining the truck, and walked up in the pitch blackness of the night. Just going up to see what the matter is, just make sure everything's okay. Looking up, he can see the light of the cabin spilling out of the front of the truck, but he can see like the light moving as if there's some kind of commotion or activity inside the truck. So he steps up on the runner of the truck and looks in, and what he sees, I don't think he had words for what he would see, because I don't have words for it either. He saw a woman completely naked, chained to the wall, the inside wall of like the sleeper area in the cabin. And that was Robert's little torture chamber. And she saw the officer looking in the window, and she just began screaming at him. So the officer then ran around to the driver's seat, whipped out his gun, and opened the door. He saw the man inside the truck try and hide behind the cabin, but he obviously just whipped out his gun and demanded he got out. The man did, calmly, and said, listen, I'm not going to cause any trouble. He calmly got out of the truck. And he was arrested right there and then, and that woman was rescued. She was taken to the hospital, and the man, Robert Rhodes, was taken to the police station. Now, the victim her name was Katie Ford, but that's not her.
Art by Jackson Brown is thrilled to present a striking piece of street art that captures the spirit and legacy of one of the most influential artists of the 20th century.
Her real name's never been given away. And she said she'd been in there for a couple of days by this point in his little torture chamber. She told the police that while he was torturing her, he told her that he had been doing this for 15 years. 15 long-ass years. Now, when the police, though, then went to speak to Robert, he just told, you don't believe her bullshit. She's just some crazy, lot lizard. She's talking gibberish. Wouldn't worry about her.
Way back to that. Invite me back. I think that's about as far as I better go.
Turn it around. Look at what you
This
got.
was, she was just going to pay me for taking her away. She was going to pay me in nature, as they say. And so, things just got a little bit too kinky maybe for her, but it's all good. Well, the police, seeing the way she was, how she was acting, the fact that she was chained up inside his cabin, then arrested Robert Rhodes for aggravated assault, sexual assault, and kidnapping. The cops then called his employer, his boss at the trucking company, and informed them they arrested one of your employees, in his truck, yada yada yada. And as they were on the phone to him, telling him about this incident just outside of Casa Grande, Arizona, Robert's boss was like, "Oh, hey, that's kind of odd," because just a couple of months previous, there had been another weird incident regarding this guy. He'd been called in for a police lineup about imprisoning somebody else. Now, charges were filed against him, and he was allowed to walk a free man. She said he didn't do it, but it's just weird that it would happen twice in a space of a couple of months. Interesting. The police then went to his truck to just scope out what the frick they could find out in the back of that cabin, because there's some sick shit going on back there. I'm not even gonna, like I said, I don't want to get into details because it's very fricked up. But they went into the back of the cabin and they're having a look around, probably trying not to touch anything. And then they find a camera tucked away just in the back of the cabin. So they get the camera out and they get the roll of film out and they go to get it developed. See, they had a good feeling there was more here than just some depraved truck driver, that he was a lot worse than what he had been caught doing was pretty bad, but they thought it could be worse. So they got his film and they got it developed, and it started showing photos of women. Lots of women, all in varying states of distress. Most of the pictures have never been released, so you can imagine. Police from all over America were given the word about this guy and those photos they found. The FBI came in and joined in on the fun. In the meantime, though, Robert took a plea deal and got 6 years for the kidnapping of Katie Ford, who he was caught with. And the police remembered, what she had told them, that he had been doing this for 15 years. And now, with all of these photos, it was starting to ring a little bit true. And so they began matching the photos they'd found, 2 missing women or Jane Doe's, bodies of murdered women that remained unsolved. And they started matching them up, and they started getting flags from all over America. It would take some time for a lot of them to be solved, but to go back to the beginning, one of those photos was of Regina Walters. There was a few of those photos of Regina Walters herself. It was in September 1990 that a farmer just outside of Greenville, Illinois, he had an old barn on his extensive property, and he was actually going to have that old barn burnt down by the local fire department, as you know, it was old and it was pretty decrepit and it was sort of falling apart. So, but one day in this September of 1990, he's like, you know what? It's going to be burnt down in a couple of days. Let me just go in there, check on it, make sure I didn't leave anything behind. There's nothing, you know, living in it or whatever. He goes to just snoop around. It was as he was climbing into the loft of that barn. He was looking around, and then in the corner on the floor, he sees an almost skeleton figure just lying there. The authorities, when they arrived, they could tell it was a young woman, a teen child almost. She'd been there for quite a while at this point, and she had been murdered. She had a wire twisted so tightly into her neck, it was still embedded in the skin. The body was processed, and then the dental records were taken to try and identify, you know, who this was. This Jane Doe, it did the rounds, and it eventually landed with the missing persons unit of the Pasadena Police Department, and they were able to match the dental records with that of Regina Walters. Initially, they actually thought Ricky may have killed her, that they ran away together and that he had killed her. Now, what they didn't know was that they had actually already found Ricky's body, but it was a John Doe at this point. They hadn't identified it as Ricky's body. So they're thinking, Ricky, he has family in Indianapolis, you know, this is on the way there. He must have killed her after they ran away together, and then yada, yada, yada. He's gone off somewhere himself now. But then the police officers from varying departments and the FBI putting together what they knew, and the photos were eventually able to identify the woman in those photos was Regina Walters, and now they'd found her body. Pretty clearly it became known that that was Robert Rhodes who had murdered her. Soon after running away, Ricky and Regina had gotten into Robert's cabin, and he did his usual MO. He was happy, charming, his grand old self, but then after driving for a couple of hours, about 4 hours north from Pasadena, he ordered them out. Just like he'd done to Candy and Douglas, got them out, and he shot Ricky in the head, because Ricky was just in the way. What he wanted was Regina. He kept Regina in his cabin for over a month. She was actually the longest victim he kept in there, and he cut her hair just like he did the others. Regina Walters was actually she had been seen in Chicago by other truckers who had spotted her, but of course they didn't know who she was and that she was a missing person down in Texas. In fact, someone would say that when they saw her, they thought she was a boy because he cut her hair so short, but she was standing out side of his truck by herself. That's like the holds Robert would have on his victims, that they wouldn't even try and run away.
Sup, you beautiful bastards. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news. I hope you had a good, or at the very least, safe weekend. We have a lot that we got to talk about today, but let's start with this.
We've got this lady drove into the area that's flooded out, and she's screaming right now. I just called 911. Fire department is coming in, but she drove right into the floodwaters. This is the Peachtree Creek, and it is rising at the moment.
So that's just one of the many horrific scenes we saw play out this weekend as Hurricane Helene battered the southeast, killing nearly 100 so far and causing massive damage. And I say so far because as I'm recording this, there are people still missing. Because the way this all played out is that the storm made landfall late Thursday night in Florida as a Category 4 hurricane before making its way through the region. And a Cat 4 is no joke. That means winds of 140 miles per hour. And then in addition to that, you have all the rain and the crazy flooding, which, I mean, just to give you a few of the many examples so you have an idea how bad it was. Over in Florida, where Helene first made landfall, entire buildings were ripped apart, with it actually making history as the first Cat 4 to hit the region since 1851. And you might think, hey, things are going to be okay, because from there, Helene quickly became a Category 1 storm and then a tropical storm. But the winds, they were still around 40 miles per hour, and there was just so much rain. But here in Georgia, like, we were on the predicted path, and then it ended up going further east, and you saw homes getting ripped apart, and there was major flooding. I mean, it was so bad, Governor Brian Kemp said, it looks like a tornado went off. It looks like a bomb went off. Near Augusta, we saw things like residents being told that the water would be turned off for between 24 and 48 hours because the storm blocked our ability to pump water. You also had Atlanta, Georgia going viral because of that moment that I showed at the beginning of this story, where you had Fox reporter Bob Van Dillen ultimately rescuing a woman, and this after she apparently drove right into the floodwaters and was screaming for help. And while Bob tried to tell her that 911 911 was called. They were on their way. She just kept crying for help. And ultimately, Bob said,
It's a situation. We will get back to you in a little bit. I'm going to go see if I can help this lady out a little bit more, you guys. I'll be back.
with him then pulling the woman out of her car and helping her out of the waters. And actually, as the Fox News anchors pointed out, Van Dillen is apparently a giant at 6'4", and the waters were up to his chest. And with that, I gotta say two things. The first is that what Van Dillen did, it is brave. He is our BAMF of the day. But then also, two, I have to let you know that what he did was extremely dangerous, and emergency personnel do not recommend it. Though that is obviously easier said than done when having is just a random sideshow that actually gets in the way of helping people on the ground. Or someone chucking paper towels into a crowd's not helping at this point. And there's actually way more important things that President Biden can be doing to help, like approving funding for temporary housing and repairs to those in affected counties across North Carolina, and making sure that there will be low-cost loans to cover uninsured property for people and businesses. And that is actually just a small taste of what Biden has approved, right? Similar FEMA emergency aid packages were approved by President Biden for Virginia, Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Georgia, while top FEMA officials are on the ground meeting with their state counterparts trying to coordinate relief efforts. And even that, it's just the tip of the iceberg. The Department of Energy is on the ground trying to help stabilize grids. Human and Health Services are sending tons of medical equipment and supplies, as well as personnel to hospitals. The Army Corps of Engineers is doing their usual thing to work on dams, as well as provide temporary power. Urban Search and Rescue sent 1,302 people, that's 24 teams, to help rescue people trapped in flood areas. And notably, even after rescue efforts finish, there's still a long road to rebuilding, which is expected to be a lot of money, with Moody's Analytics predicting there is between $15 and $25 billion in
And this is Slapped Ham. You're about to see some really unsettling content that's being shared on socials right now. So hit that subscribe button and get ready for more creepy content, just like this. This footage was initially caught during a live stream by paranormal investigators Sean and Cody for their Instagram, The New Reality 11. The stream begins with the investigators explaining that they're in an abandoned building somewhere in the deserts of Idaho.
I don't know where we're at. We're in the middle of the desert, and we found another abandoned location.
Kind of knocked right where that was.
Yeah.
They claim that as soon as they arrived, they heard strange voices and banging sounds coming from empty rooms.
And it's got a creepy vibe to it, right? We came in, we were getting knocks, we heard the voice in the other room.
Yeah, and then those weird K2 hits you on the Eddie.
Yeah.
The clip shows them exploring room after room of the derelict building.
This place is massive, guys. Like, it's crazy.
More than half an hour into the stream, the pair of investigators find a mysterious hatch leading to a small basement. Inside the room, they discover an old children's swing set among the debris.
Stomach. How creepy. Look at that child's swing, bro.
The ghost hunters comment on the eerie vibe of the basement.
That's crazy, dude.
Bro.
Dude, so when we went down to the attic, I got a feeling, it's a bad feeling, but I got a feeling of a little baby in there.
Like kept down there. I felt like it was a punishment area. Like,
right.
Get down there and
right.
Whatever.
Towards the end of the stream, the brave investigators decide to take one last peek in the basement. This time, something truly unsettling happens. Take a look.
Is that a ball? There's a ball. Oh, it just moved! Oh my god, it just moved! It just moved. Holy cow!
As you can see, the ball on the ground seems to move all by itself.
There's a ball. Oh, it just moved! Oh my god, it just moved! Holy...
Cody and Sean are stunned by the strange event.
Oh, it just moved! Oh my god, it just moved! It just moved. Holy cow!
The strange sounds and whispers and the inexplicable movement of the ball have left viewers wondering if something sinister happened in this building, causing it to become abandoned.
Another knock. Yeah, right.
Could that basement have been used as a punishment room for some poor child long ago? Let that thought sink in for just a moment. Sean and Cody also run a YouTube channel called The New Reality Paranormal. They regularly investigate strange and eerie locations. As always, there's links in the description box below.
Did you hear that? Yeah, I heard that. That was a knock, right?
The following video, posted to TikTok by username voided.1, is without a question one of the strangest and most unsettling videos you'll see in quite some time. The short clip comes from an unknown source, but some viewers think it originated in Peru. It shows a woman looking at something in the corner of a room in and out of view. The woman then proceeds to tell whatever this strange thing is that she's not afraid of it and orders it to leave the building immediately. She even tries to kick the shadow. The video ends soon after and everybody involved was unharmed. But even still, it definitely makes you wonder what exactly this woman was dealing with. What is this strange shadow? If it's a spirit, is it friendly or evil? These are questions that we'll most likely never get answers to. Similarly, this series of videos posted by Reddit user RUAmyC143 seems to have stumped even the most discerning of skeptics. The first clip sent Redditors into a frenzy in an attempt to decipher just what's going on in the 3-minute video. The uploader explains that she originally purchased the camera situated in her room as she had heard noises and seen odd figures in her house since she had moved in. The resulting clip is filled with odd shadows and dusty anomalies flitting by the camera. At around the 30-second mark, something eerie can be seen. Keep an eye on the doorway. As you can see, a strange figure creeps past the open door. The figure appears to pace back and forth and is seen at multiple points throughout the video. Take a look at the 1 minute 16 mark. You can see the figure pace back across the doorway. Then again at the 1 minute 42 mark. While one of the top commenters floats the idea that the anomalies present in the video are nothing more than floating dust, the comment sets off a wave of similarly minded commenters agreeing with the idea that the contents of this video are alarming. The consensus seems to be that the figure is distressingly humanoid and worryingly seems to hang around the uploader's bedroom. In response to the attention the first clip received, the uploader chose to release a second clip, in an attempt to clarify just what exactly the area outside of her bedroom door looked like. The video shows the angle at which the camera was pointing, as well as the hall directly across from it.
In my hallway. Now if you watch where I go.
The video demonstrates that the figure would have walked straight into a wall adjacent to the doorway.
Here is the wall they walked into. I don't know what else you want me to tell you.
This makes it unlikely to be simply a person pacing back and forth, as they would have been blocked by the wall.
Wall they walked into.
Adding to the cavalcade of supernatural activity surrounding the home, this third clip seems to further confirm the presence of something odd in the uploader's home. Take a look.
What are you trying to find? What do you see?
It is well documented through similar videos that cats seem to have an eye for the supernatural. Oftentimes, cat owners will catch their feline companions staring off into space, seemingly looking directly at nothing. While some may dismiss this as unknowable pet behaviour, others seem to take this as confirmation of the ability that cats can see ghosts and other supernatural beings. Thoroughly creeped out by the cat's behaviour, the uploader seems to take the event as proof that she's not the only one to have noticed odd activity in the home.
There's something with that wall. That's the same wall that it keeps walking into.
A fourth post seems to capture the same shadowy figure. This time we're treated to a still frame from one of the video feeds. Take a look. While the still frame is blurry, we can make out a strange shadowy figure standing in the middle of the room. The uploader does appear to be genuinely freaked out by the alleged hauntings, and judging by the footage, it would appear something mysterious does indeed appear to be happening in the home. Love to get your thoughts on this one in the comments section below. For most horror lovers, ghost tours are typically seen as a tourist trap, with genuine ghostly sightings a rarity. Tourist David Duran expected more or less of the same on a visit to Savannah's Sorrelweed house, where suicide and murder have run rampant. While his initial trip proved to be disappointing, the next day, checking the photos he took on the tour, brought his experience into an entirely new, horrifying light. In the first photo Duran took, we see a mirror with other tourists taking pictures of it, as the mirror is supposedly haunted. Nothing looks particularly abnormal in the photograph, along with the second picture, which is overexposed. It's the third photograph that viewers get a glimpse of something goosebump-worthy. The tourists in the picture's right-hand side have turned away from the mirror, but one figure's reflection seems to remain. The figure looks to be a young man who is tall, lanky, and looking into the camera. Duran explained that the young man reflected in the mirror was not part of the tour group, with his attire looking something like and reflected in the mirror. The figure looks away from the mirror, but one figure's reflection seems to remain. The figure looks to be a young man who is tall, lanky, and looking into the camera. Duran explained that the young man reflected in the mirror was not part of the tour group, with his attire looking something like it could have been found in another century. He had checked the timestamps with other members of the group, and none had recalled seeing the man on the tour or in any other picture either. After some research, Duran discovered that the Sorrelweed house is located near an area where a bloody battle occurred during the American Revolutionary War. Could this figure be a ghost of a soldier who has remained forever trapped here on Earth? The owners of Sorrelweed House are investigating the image, as are several other paranormal specialists. The general consensus seems to be that this is indeed evidence of a ghost.
At Elements Massage, we know that now more than ever, it's important to prioritize your self-care. Whether you're looking for a relaxing escape from daily stress or seeking to
Blake Smith's Gaming Blitz provided a video saga of ghostly wailing coming from his basement. The 3 videos he uploaded to his YouTube channel give 3 different accounts of a very mysterious situation that would eventually even involve the police. In the first video, the YouTuber explains that he's alone in his house and hears what he believes are crying noises coming from his basement, possibly of a young woman or child.
I hear what sounds like crying coming from the basement. I got a deadbolt for the basement after the last occurrence down there, but...
He recently purchased a deadbolt for the basement, he elaborates, after the last time this same situation occurred, hoping to keep whatever was crying out. He states that he even called the police last time, who managed to find wet footprints in the basement after a search of the area.
I even called the police. They found wet footprints down there when I let them down there, so I don't know what the... Alright. Let's just...
He walks down the basement stairs. Listen to what he captured. It sounds like a crying child. The man calls out, "Hello?" to no reply except more loud wailing.
Hello? Hello?
He continues to call out as he walks into the basement. He shows viewers a weird substance on the wall that resembles handprints before panning the camera around to an empty room. This next video, which is a little longer, sees the YouTuber explaining the situation again, where he adds that he's heard loud bangs and other eerie sounds coming from the basement recently at unusual times.
I don't know what's going on now. I keep hearing bangs and just really weird noises coming from the basement, and
he adds that some viewers of his last video recommended that he leave his phone in the basement to see if he could capture anything peculiar. He walks down to the basement once more, moving the camera around to see if he can spot anything unusual, but nothing appears. He then sets his phone down and leaves the room. A minute after he goes, the noises begin. The noises are a mix of screaming, wailing, and howling. After a couple of minutes, the man comes back downstairs, looking around and asking if there's anyone there.
Hello?
There are no more sounds. The man picks up his camera and leaves the room. As he begins to walk up the stairs, he whispers that he just saw a shadow and he flees up the stairs.
I just saw a shadow move away from underneath. Oh man, I'm out.
In this last clip, the man walks down the stairs, turning on a bright light as the scary sounds emerge once again.
Hello?
The man shines a light in the basement, calling out to no response before the video abruptly ends.
Hello?
These YouTube videos have received tens of thousands of views and mixed responses. Some argue that the sounds resemble those usually found in a recording or video and therefore might be fake. Others swear that there's a spirit haunting the basement, possibly a child who died there long ago. However, the fact that the police allegedly found wet footprints in the basement make this video saga chilling for all who see it.
When a child is sick, there's one thing they need: a really big cookie.
This next eerie image was uploaded to Facebook by Dom Fujarski. Some years ago, this couple were dining at a restaurant that was built on top of an old mine. The property is famous for its mining history and prominently displays memorabilia from its bygone years. The couple had this photo taken while dining in the restaurant. However, in the background of the image, you can make out a transparent man floating right in the middle of the room. He looks to have a long beard and is wearing a white button-up shirt, very similar to a miner's uniform. Dom says this is a snap of the physical photo itself, which was developed in a store, meaning it couldn't have been photoshopped. While there's a slight chance this could be double exposure, the man's uncanny resemblance to an old miner certainly makes this a creepy photo. In early October 2022, Reddit user Witwa101 submitted a video of 3 unidentified flying objects cruising through the sky. The sighting prompted a thorough debate on whether aliens might be surveying our planet. Take a look.
In this video, we explore some of the most horrifying child deaths ever recorded. These heartbreaking and disturbing stories serve as a chilling reminder of the fragility of life. Viewer discretion is strongly advised as we delve into 1 hour of the most tragic and shocking child deaths of all time.
On July 22, 2024, Clodagh Phelan, an 11-year-old girl from County Wicklow, Ireland, was on vacation with her family at the Club Mac Hotel in Puerto de Alcudia, Mallorca, Spain. The hotel is located on the northeast coast of the island. Clodagh stayed with her parents, Liam and Valerie, and her 2 brothers, Will and David. The family had been enjoying their time at the resort, which was meant to be a relaxing break before returning home. That morning, around 6:30 a.m., Clodagh's parents and brothers were still asleep in their hotel room on the 7th floor. Clodagh woke up early and went out onto the balcony of their room. According to reports, she might have leaned over the railing. Tragically, Clodagh fell from the 7th floor of the hotel. She fell 65 feet and landed on the roof of a restaurant below. Emergency responders were called immediately after the fall. Despite their efforts, they could not save Clodagh. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The Spanish Civil Guard is treating Clodagh's death as an accident. They are investigating the fall's circumstances, but have confirmed that it appears to have been a tragic mishap. Clodagh was a bright and talented young girl. She was known for her involvement in sports, including athletics, camogie, football, rugby, and hockey. Her love for other activities matched her enthusiasm for sports. She had a passion for music and drama and enjoyed singing and performing. Clodagh was also generous and thoughtful, often buying gifts for her family and friends. Her death has led to an outpouring of grief and tributes from her community. At her funeral at the
Discover the Art Coast of Michigan, where farm to glass takes center stage and the delicious drinks flows freely as
Holy Trinity Church in Kessel Macadam, Avoca. Her teammates from various sports clubs and schoolmates formed a guard of honor. Her small white coffin was carried into the church, and mourners paid their respects to the young girl who had touched many lives. Clodagh's mother, Valerie, shared that their hearts were broken into 1,000 pieces. She recalled Clodagh's personality, love for sports, and kind nature. Valerie described how Clodagh would spend hours shopping for gifts, and how she was always enthusiastic about school and sports. Her father, Liam, and her 2 brothers, Will and David, also mourned the loss of a beloved family member. Clodagh's school, St. Saviour's National School, where she was a popular and well-liked student, described her as a wonderful, happy student who worked hard. The school remembered her as a great friend to all her classmates and a talented athlete. Her sports clubs, including Parnell Athletic Club, Rathdrum Rugby Club, Clara Ladies Gaelic Football Association, and Wicklow Hockey Club, also paid tribute to her skills and commitment. The local community has come together to support the Phelan family during this difficult time. Many have expressed their condolences and shared their memories of Clodagh. Her tragic death has left a void in the hearts of those who knew her. This event raises some questions about safety in hotel environments, especially concerning balcony safety for young children. What measures could have prevented this accident? How can families ensure that such tragedies do not happen again? The investigation continues, aiming to provide answers and avoid similar incidents in the future. It was July 26, 2017, when Tyler Jarrell and his girlfriend Keziah Lewis arrived at the Ohio State Fair for an exciting day of fun. After spending an extremely taxing morning at her grandfather's funeral, Keziah found the lively and vibrant fair to be the ideal place to unwind. As they wandered through the colorful attractions and bustling crowds, neither of them could have predicted the terrible tragedy that the Fireball ride would bring them. Tyler, an 18-year-old Columbus, Ohio, fresh high school graduate, had recently signed up for the Marines. His proud moment of enlisting was captured in a photo he posted on Facebook. The picture shows him carrying a plaque while wearing his Marine Corps uniform. Tyler and Keziah made the decision to end their visit that day by riding the Fireball, an exhilarating attraction that swung riders 40 feet into the air while spinning them at high speeds. Little did they know this ride would malfunction disastrously, leading to a catastrophic outcome. At first, everything seemed normal as the Fireball began its rotation. However, a sudden, strong shaking disrupted the ride and alarmed the passengers. And then it happened. A whole section of the roller coaster snapped, flinging passengers into the air. Tyler was thrown with such force that he never stood a chance. Keziah, Tyler's girlfriend, was severely injured in the horrifying accident, suffering severe damage to her pelvis, ankles, and ribs. The chaos that followed was beyond description. As emergency responders raced to the site, onlookers watched in shock. But it was too late for Tyler Gerald, who had died upon impact. The investigation that followed showed that the fireball had been inspected and deemed safe by the Ohio Department of Agriculture a few hours prior to the tragedy. Yet something had gone seriously wrong. Authorities quickly shut down all rides at the fair, and KMG International BV, the manufacturer of the fireball, instructed operators worldwide to cease operations of similar rides. The investigation revealed structural flaws that had gone undetected, raising questions about the frequency and thoroughness of ride inspections. The emotional toll on Tyler's family and friends was immense. Keziah, Tyler's girlfriend, was devastated to hear about his passing when she woke up in the hospital after undergoing multiple surgeries. The town of Columbus, where Tyler was highly regarded and well loved, mourned the loss of a bright young man whose destiny was snatched away so suddenly. Following the incident, Amber Duffield, Tyler's mother, and other supporters pushed for stricter safety laws. This resulted in the Tyler's Law Initiative, which sought to enhance Ohio's safety standards for amusement rides. The purpose of the bill was to make sure that operators are held to higher accountability standards and that rides go through more thorough inspections. As the fair reopened, albeit with a somber atmosphere, and rides temporarily closed, the tragedy left an indelible mark on all who attended. For Keziah, who would never regain full mobility, the journey of recovery was both physical and emotional. Yet she found strength in advocating for safety improvements, hoping to prevent future tragedies.
Travis Scott's Astroworld Festival was a captivating annual music event that took over Houston's NRG Park. This high-energy-filled festival united music fans and Travis Scott enthusiasts for a weekend of epic performances, immersive experiences, and top-notch artistry. Ezra Blount, a 9-year-old boy from Dallas, Texas, was a huge fan of Travis Scott's music. He had been looking forward to attending the Astroworld Music Festival in Houston with his father, Treston Blount, for weeks. On November 5th, 2021, they finally arrived at the festival grounds, excited to see Travis Scott perform live. As the countdown to Scott's performance began, Treston lifted Ezra onto his shoulders, hoping to give him a better view. They stood near the back of the crowd, thinking it would be a safer spot. But as Scott took the stage, the crowd rushed forward, causing a dangerous crush and stampede. Due to this sudden surge, Treston lost consciousness, and when he finally woke up, he realized that Ezra was missing. Panic set in as Treston frantically searched for his son. He rushed to the on-site medic tents and several hospitals, desperate.
From the beauty of nature to the history of the lake, our guided hydrobike
to find Ezra, all to no avail. Eventually, he filed a police report and received a message from an officer with a picture of his boy. At the hospital, Treston discovered that Ezra had suffered severe damage to his brain, kidneys, and liver. He had been kicked, stepped on, and trampled, nearly crushed to death. Ezra's family was devastated by the news. In the days that followed, Ezra's condition remained critical. He was placed in a medically induced coma, fighting for his life. The family held a vigil, praying for his recovery. But one Sunday, 10 days after the incident, Ezra's condition took a turn for the worse. The family's attorney stated that Ezra's death was a direct result of the defendant's negligence and that they would hold them accountable. The lawsuit claimed that the defendants had failed to provide a safe environment for concertgoers, despite knowing the risks associated with large crowds. As the investigation into the incident continued, more details emerged about the lack of safety measures in place at the festival. It became clear that the tragedy was preventable and that the defendants had failed to take necessary steps to protect the attendees, as Ezra was not the only victim of this misfortune. Witnesses described the scene as chaotic, with people screaming and trying to escape the crush. Many reported seeing festival staff and security standing by, doing nothing to help. It was also revealed that the festival had not provided adequate training to its staff, and that there were not enough medical personnel on site. The incident raised questions about the responsibility of event organizers and performers to ensure the safety of their audience. The final investigation revealed that the festival had a history of safety issues, and there had been reports of overcrowding and inadequate security at previous events. It was also reported that Travis Scott had continued to perform for over 30 minutes after the crowd surge began, despite being aware of the danger. This decision was widely criticized, with many calling for Scott to take responsibility for his role in the tragedy. In response to the tragedy, Travis Scott released a statement, expressing devastation over the events of that night and offering prayers for the families and all those negatively affected by the Astroworld Festival. He also announced plans to cover funeral costs, provide further aid to affected individuals, and refund all concertgoers and ticket holders. Yet despite these efforts, the tragic loss of young Ezra Blunt's life could not be undone, leaving his family in irreparable grief.
It was April 20th, 2005, in the North Georgia mountains, at the Appalachian Wilderness Camp in Cleveland. Travis Parker, a 13-year-old boy from Douglas County, Georgia, was sent to this state-run camp for troubled youth. Travis had a history of behavioral issues and was on probation after hitting his grandmother, Golden Griffin, and threatening her with a knife. Despite their troubled relationship, Golden Griffin cared deeply for Travis, having adopted him when he was just 18 months old. On this day, Travis confronted a counselor for withholding food as punishment. The counselors decided to restrain him. What happened next led to a tragic series of events that would end in Travis's death and a subsequent legal battle. As the confrontation escalated, 6 counselors, Ryan Chapman, Paul Binford, Matthew Deasing, Torben Vining, Johnny Harris, and Philip Elliott, decided to restrain Travis. Witnesses reported that Travis was held face down by at least 3 counselors at a time. Travis, who had asthma, pleaded for his inhaler, but the counselors did not give it to him. They believed he was not experiencing an asthma attack, as confirmed by an emergency medical technician on site who saw no signs such as wheezing. For over an hour, Travis struggled against the restraint, his breathing becoming increasingly labored. Despite the counselors' claims that they monitored his vital signs, Travis eventually stopped breathing. The situation turned serious and the counselors finally released him, but it was too late. Travis was transported to a nearby hospital where he passed away the following day, April 21st, 2005. The medical examiner ruled Travis's death a homicide, caused by positional asphyxia due to the prolonged face-down restraint. This ruling set off a chain of legal actions. A White County grand jury handed down charges of felony murder, child cruelty, and involuntary manslaughter against the 6 counselors. White County District Attorney Stan Gunter stated that the charges were based on the criminal negligence or reckless conduct of the individuals involved. Gwen Skinner, an official at the Georgia Department of Human Resources, which oversaw the camp, said that the counselors were not following agency rules or procedures. "We do not train staff to do face-down restraints," she emphasized. Despite these allegations, the counselors' defense argued that they were following their training. The case against the 6 counselors became a point of debate. Defense attorney Abby Guest, representing Matthew Deasing, insisted that the counselors were doing what they were trained to do. "This is clearly not a case of counselors gone awry," she said. The counselors maintained that they acted in the best interest of the children they worked with and followed the guidelines provided to them. However, the prosecution argued otherwise. DA Stan Gunter emphasized the reckless nature of the restraint and its deadly consequences. The case was set to go to trial, but in a surprising turn of events, White County Superior Court Judge Lynn Akeley Alderman dismissed the charges of felony murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child cruelty against the counselors. Judge Akeley Alderman's ruling was based on several factors. The medical examiner, Dr. Chris Sperry, testified that Travis's death was due to positional asphyxia, resulting from his prolonged resistance during the restraint. Dr. Sperry suggested that had Travis not struggled so intensely, he might not have died. The judge noted that similar restraints had been applied to Travis in the past without fatal results, and that the counselors could not have foreseen the tragic outcome. The judge's decision to dismiss the charges sparked outrage and disappointment among Travis's family and supporters. Travis's grandmother, Golden Griffin, expressed her frustration and sorrow, stating that those responsible for her grandson's death should be held accountable. The family's attorney, Thomas Cuffey, supported this sentiment, emphasizing the need for justice. In response to the incident, the Georgia Department of Human Resources retrained its staff on the proper use of restraints and reviewed its policies to ensure clarity and prevent such tragedies in the future. Gwen Skinner stated the importance of making sure that the guidelines were crystal clear to avoid any confusion about when and how restraints should be used. On June 1st, 2024, it was a sunny day in Limerick, Maine. The Morgan family, hailing from Stockholm, New Jersey, was on a much-needed vacation. Jesse Morgan, a pastor, his wife Bethany, and their 4 children were spending quality time together at a lakeside cottage. The vacation was meant to be a time of rest and bonding, away from their busy lives back home. Lucy Morgan, their 6-year-old daughter, was full of life. She loved Chick-fil-A, drawing, dancing, soccer, and spending time with her family. Lucy was also curious about her faith, and had recently asked her mother, Bethany, how to be with God and be saved. Bethany had explained it to her, and Lucy, in her characteristic independence, wanted to pray on her own. She later journaled about her newfound faith, expressing her love for God in words and pictures. On that day, the Morgan family was enjoying a peaceful afternoon. They were eating a quick lunch by the lake when the children decided to play badminton in the front yard. The youngest, Lucy, was sitting on the sidelines, excitedly watching her siblings.
Toronto would not be Toronto without the artists. The community pours into you, and then...
Jesse and Bethany were relaxing in the back when they heard a sudden scream. Rushing to the front, they discovered a horrifying scene. In a freak accident, the aluminum shaft of a badminton racket had broken off its wooden handle and pierced Lucy's skull. The sharp piece had caused a catastrophic brain injury. Lucy was still breathing but unresponsive. Jesse and Bethany held their daughter, crying to God for a miracle. Limerick Fire and Emergency Medical Services arrived quickly, and Lucy was transported to a local hospital before being airlifted to Maine Medical Center in Portland. Doctors at the medical center removed part of Lucy's skull to relieve the pressure on her brain. Despite their efforts, her condition wasn't stable. Lucy's brain functioning had essentially ceased, and it was unlikely she would ever recover. The Morgans were told to prepare for the worst. They spent the next few days in a state of incomprehensible pain, hoping for a miracle but bracing for the inevitable. Jesse documented their harrowing journey on his blog, sharing the family's struggles and their faith. On June 4th, the morning of the day Lucy was predicted to pass, Bethany's cries of pain were heard through the hospital, reminding her of the day she gave birth to Lucy nearly 7 years ago. The pain of a mother losing her child was indescribable. The Morgans faced the heartbreaking task of explaining the situation to Lucy's 3 siblings. 8-year-old Shiloh broke down immediately, unable to imagine life without her sister. 4-year-old AJ clung to his parents, asking endless questions in his typical style. 10-year-old Silas tried to be strong, but eventually broke down, declaring that he didn't want to be a family of 5. As the days passed, the Morgans found comfort in their faith and the support of their extended family and church community. They sang Lucy's favorite hymn, "He Will Hold Me Fast," at her bedside. On June 5th at 1:32 a.m., Lucy was declared brain dead. A few hours later, her heart stopped beating. Returning home to New Jersey was another ordeal. The family arrived to find their steps lined with flowers and a fridge stocked with food, but entering their home was one of the hardest things they had ever done. They sat on the front steps crying together, before mustering the courage to go inside. Once inside, they collapsed on the kitchen floor, overwhelmed by grief. Amid their sorrow, they discovered an unexpected gift. Lucy's prayer journal, given to her a month before her passing, contained her heartfelt prayers and drawings. The final entry was a picture that Shiloh believed depicted Mary and Martha weeping over the body of Lazarus, a reflection of Lucy's understanding of faith and resurrection. This discovery comforted the grieving family, affirming Lucy's deep, though childlike faith. The family's ordeal did not end with Lucy's passing. Jesse continued sharing their journey on his blog, reflecting on their pain and efforts to find light amidst the darkness. The community rallied around them, raising over $135,000 through a GoFundMe campaign to support the family. As they went through their grief, the Morgans clung to their faith. Jesse's blog posts were raw and honest, detailing the family's attempts to cope with their loss.
For Buick, we want you to feel really special. We want the driver to really feel like we've taken care of all of the details.
Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this solo video, I got for you a number, and that number is 5, of the darkest disappearances. This is another in that fan favorite series, and by fan favorite, I mean me. You know, there's far too many missing people cases that are just a horrifying or inexplicable. And usually the explicable part is pretty horrifying. I'm gonna go through this one iceberg style, with each disappearance being more disturbing than the last. So, hey, listen. Let's give it one of them damn goos. Our first story begins in... and then just showed up at the family home unannounced, and herself and her parents made multiple trips over and back, grabbed her stuff from Montreal, brought it back to Quebec. Now, so they would ask Marilyn, what's going on? Why are you too scared? Explain. Marilyn wouldn't say. She would never say. But her mom said it seemed like she was carrying something heavy. She would burst into tears at times. One thing I've noticed throughout this, and it's probably what you're thinking, is maybe she's going through some mental health issues, but nobody ever mentions that, and her family don't mention that. They all say something, it seemed like something happened, rather than she was maybe battling severe depression or anything like that. But no matter what, secrets, always with the secrets. Then, on the morning of the 17th, she was heading out the door for a walk. Her parents were there. They saw her going out. They're like, oh no, they were kind of worried about her. So her mom had a coffee with her, just trying to get her to stay. But regardless, Marilyn walked out the door. And that was one of the last times she was seen, but she never returned home. About 10 minutes after she left the home, she was spotted on a security camera at an ATM. She was trying to withdraw 60 Canadian dollars. The machine, however, declined the money. It wasn't her bank account she was trying to access, it was her dad's, so she never really used it. But she did have a card he had given her, and he had told her the PIN ages ago, kind of like emergency, in case you ever need money, you can use my account. But likely, as she had never used it, she might have just forgotten the PIN number. In the footage, it looks like she's looking around, and she does seem scared. From people who know the area where this bank is, she's looking out onto a street, and some people suggested perhaps she's looking at a car. She's also wearing a backpack. Her mom would say she did not have that on her when she left the house, and they'd never seen that backpack before. Somehow in the 10 minutes, between this footage and when she left the house, she had a backpack. See, back in December, 2 months before all of this, she had met up with a friend, and then they'd gone to a party together, and the friend would say, yeah, Marilyn, she wasn't, herself back then. It seemed like there was really, really something wrong, something heavy. Something was bothering her. She wasn't her usual happy, jolly self. Marilyn, they're at this party. Marilyn starts talking to a friend, then goes back to this guy, the friend who's telling the story, and she would just say, I have to go. We have to go. We have to get out of here. And so, they went and they were walking, and Marilyn and this guy were just yapping away, and he's trying to, like, what's wrong, Marilyn? Why are you acting this way? And he asked her, like, were you sexually assaulted? Did somebody attack you? Or are you the victim of some kind of thing? And she would say, no, it's worse than that. She would say, it's worse. You can't imagine what I've been put through. This guy, her friend kept trying to get it out of Marilyn for hours and hours and hours, and Marilyn, she wasn't giving it.
At Publicis Sapient, digital is in our DNA. For 30 years, we've helped the world's largest organizations.
When investigators only have a surveillance photo as a clue during a missing person investigation, their job becomes much harder, as it doesn't provide them with much context, other than the fact that the person was in that area at that time. They then need to speak to eyewitnesses who saw that person before they went missing, and hope that they can establish their movements leading up to their disappearance. One of a parent's worst fears is that their child could go missing. Many people who have experienced this awful set of circumstances state that the worst thing about it is not knowing whether or not they're okay and whether they will ever see them again. This is the nightmare that Biljana Zelik faced in 1999 when her 26-year-old daughter, Donna Zelik, inexplicably disappeared from their home in Ontario, Canada. And it's a mystery that she still has to live with every day, as Donna's case has never been solved. Biljana originally hailed from Serbia. She married a Yugoslavian man named Mihailo, and the couple eventually had 2 children, Donna and her brother Bata. When the marriage ended in divorce, though, Biljana had to work 4 different jobs to care for her children. And despite her best efforts, Donna stated that she would have preferred to have lived with Mihailo. Following her graduation from high school, Donna met a man that she started dating, and they moved in together. But when the relationship ended, she struggled to get over it and started losing weight after moving back home. She immediately started looking for her own place. But before she could move out, she disappeared and has not been seen by her family since. The last time that Biljana saw her daughter was in the early morning hours of the 30th of August, 1999. That night, Donna was reading a book in the family's living room before eventually retiring to her bedroom. Biljana stated that she last saw Donna lying on her bed, still wearing the clothes that she had on during the day. Biljana then went to her room and fell asleep at around 3 a.m. When she woke up the next morning at about 7 a.m., she noticed that her daughter wasn't in her room, but she didn't think much of it, as she assumed that she'd gotten up early to visit one of her friends. But when it became clear that that wasn't the case, she checked her room again and realized that Donna had left her identification and, more importantly, her medication behind. She started to worry that something may be wrong and decided to file a missing person report. A search of the area didn't yield any results, and there was no indication of what could have happened to Donna until Biljana spotted a photo from the Hamilton Spectator newspaper, which was running a story on the Take Back the Night rally that took place on the 16th of September. In the photo, Donna can be seen walking with another man while their arms are interlocked, and her family describes her as looking frail, causing them further concern for her welfare. The case would have another twist in store when Biljana received a series of strange phone calls. Biljana reported to investigators that she was receiving strange phone calls from an unknown number, and that the person on the other side of the line always hung up before she could find out who it was.
Looks like laundry day is today. No, hey, no.
OxiClean Max 4 spray. Spray now and wash up to 7 days later.
You're still cool? I love you.
ISP Supplies is a certified Ubiquiti distributor. We provide a comprehensive selection of Ubiquiti products, encompassing Unify gateways, Wi-Fi solutions, switching devices, security cameras, door access systems, VoIP telephony, as well as USB fiber, routing and switching equipment, and a variety of wireless options such as LTU, AirMax, AirFiber, and Wave 60 GHz technology. We are network engineers with decades of experience designing, building, operating, and maintaining networks of different sizes, capacity, and purposes. Our team is passionate about help.
On one occasion, a message was left on her answering machine with a female voice saying, "Hi Mom, I'm okay." Donna's friends and family were never sure whether it was Donna's voice in the message, and before it could be handed over to investigators, it was accidentally erased. Almost a year after the photo was published, one of Donna's male friends contacted the police to report that Donna had called him. He was unaware that she was the focus of a missing person investigation at the time, and reported that she was now living about 30 miles from her hometown. She didn't give any further details, though, so investigators had no clue as to who she was with or where her exact whereabouts were. Donna was spotted one last time 2 years later in 2002, when a friend of hers reported seeing her inside of a bookshop in her hometown. There's a lot of ambiguity regarding this sighting, as this branch of the bookstore had closed 2 years earlier, and the friend may have gotten mixed up with a branch in Ancaster, which was still operating. Donna has still not been found more than 2 decades after she vanished, but her family remains hopeful that she will be found safely one day. They describe her as standing 5 foot 6 inches tall and weighing around 100 pounds. She has brown hair, brown eyes, and can be identified by a birthmark on her neck. She'd been known to use 3 different names other than her own, including Frankie, Alex, and Donna. If you have any information on Donna's case, you're asked to contact the Hamilton Police Service at 915-546-4962. On the 19th of February, 2016, 37-year-old Catherine Ackling Bryan seemed to be out of sorts when she dropped her 2 daughters off at school for the day. She'd been crying on the way there, according to the 2 girls, and seemingly didn't care that one of them was still wearing her pajamas instead of her school uniform. The school contacted her family shortly afterward to inform her that they'd given the girl a uniform to wear for the day, and Catherine would then travel back to the school to drop off her school shoes. No one is certain why Catherine's strange behavior that morning didn't cause alarm, since she was well known among the school staff. But whatever the case may be, Catherine then left the school and went to a Target store at St. Mary's Shopping Village, where she was captured on CCTV surveillance footage. At the store, she bought a few items of clothing for the girls, after which she went home where she started cooking. No one knows what happened to Catherine during the next few hours, as she was never seen again. What is known is that she contacted both of her parents and her 2 brothers that morning, and they reported that nothing seemed out of the ordinary during the phone calls. They did find it strange that she contacted all of her family members, one after another, on that same morning, though. When her husband, Michael Bryan, was contacted by the school to inform him that Catherine hadn't fetched. On March 4th,
Orajel knows that oral pain keeps you from feeling like yourself. Get immediate relief with Orajel.
New Jersey is leading the nation in clean energy investments with one thing in mind: you. Our clean energy program offers more ways than ever to help you.
Missing person cases are among the most intriguing true crime mysteries out there, since they're often filled with uncertainties, including the circumstances surrounding the disappearance, the people who were involved, and where that person disappeared to. But they're also often tragic cases that are never solved, and for the families and loved ones that stay behind, the uncertainty can be too much to bear. In 2014, 39-year-old Karen Ray Bosta moved from New Jersey, where she worked as a teacher, to Hertford in North Carolina, and here she moved in with her mother. She was taking medication on a daily basis for cognitive impairment, and when she mysteriously disappeared on the 30th of May the following year, there were grave concerns for her well-being, since she would have suffered serious side effects without them. On that day, Karen had planned to visit some of her friends, but before she set out to do so, she told her mother that she needed to run a few errands. She then left the house, and it just seemed like any other normal day. Later that same day, she sent a text message to her mother, saying that she would be coming home earlier than she expected, and that night at around 10 p.m., witnesses saw her exiting a Food Lion store that was located on North Broad Street and Coke Avenue. She'd used her mother's credit card to make some purchases, which wasn't strange, but it was odd that she did so on 3 separate transactions, rather than buying everything she needed at once. Her mother waited for her to return home that night, but she never did, and when she still wasn't home the following morning, her mother reported her missing to the Perquimans County Police Department. No one had any idea what had happened to Karen, but on the 31st of May, her mother realized that the same credit card used at the Food Lion store was used at a gas station in an area located between Edenton and Hertford. Then, on the 8th of June, investigators grew even more concerned when they found Karen's car abandoned in a parking lot that was situated between an apartment complex, and it was immediately searched after the doors were unlocked. Inside, they found no helpful evidence, since the only item found was the same packet of cigarettes that she bought at the convenience store before she disappeared. The keys were nowhere to be found. There was no sign of Karen, and there were no strange fingerprints on the car. It was then discovered that one of Karen's friends, a man named Thomas White, had used her mother's credit card at the gas station, and he was interviewed by investigators. When asked how he came to be in possession of the card, he stated that he found it lying on the porch of his house. He then agreed to take a lie detector test, which he failed. Despite this, investigators have stated that White likely wasn't involved with Karen's disappearance, but they do suspect that he may know more than he's letting on. He would eventually be charged with one count of obtaining property by false pretense in regards to the credit card, and he was ordered to serve 6 weekends in jail, after which he would remain on parole. Strangely, Karen's cell phone records indicated that she went to White's house on several occasions on the day she disappeared, and that she drove her car all over town during the day.
Batiste Touch and Sweat Activated Dry Shampoo. Up to 24 hours of fresh hair.
Italian sausage bake.
Smooth Luxe. It is the very leather-like material. I've been using it a lot because I got it in every color. It's amazing stuff, but not, in my opinion, not domestic machine friendly per se. So just be aware of that. So this will be my top zipper panel, or my zipper, my zipper gusset. Yeah, my zipper panel, right? Yeah, okay. It's for the top of my bag. I need 2 of those. And I'm not going to interface it again. I don't think you could. It just would make it, I mean, I could interface it, but I don't think it's absolutely needed on this one. I tend to over interface my bags, And so I was trying to go lighter this time around, and I like how it turned out, so we're just going to do the other one like that too. How embarrassing. You spelled therapy wrong. That's funny. So this is the bottom main gusset of my bag. Okay.
You know who he is, P.
Sorry, I don't know why YouTube is placing so many ads on this live. I'll have to go look at that setting. I must have marked something wrong. Sorry about that. Okay. What else do I need? I've got that. I think that's all for this. The top, front, and back. And then I need to do little... So I'm going to do the connectors again because they were really stinking cute.
La cucaracha, la cucarachas. Ya no puede caminar. Porque le falta, porque le falta. Here goes this window. Voila.
Leading to the closure of this case, as she still remains missing today. Karen is described as having brown hair and blue eyes. She stands between 5'2" and 5'4" inches tall, and at the time weighed between 140 and 150 pounds. She has a butterfly tattoo on her lower back and another of a strawberry between her shoulder blades. The last time that anyone saw Karen, she was wearing white shorts, a white t-shirt, gray slip-on shoes, and she had a pink pocketbook with her, as well as a butterfly keychain on which she kept her keys. If you have any helpful information on this case, you're asked to contact the Perkins County Sheriff's Office at 252-426-56.
No difference? No, okay.
Or the Edenton Police Department at 252-482-5144. Karen's nameless case number is MP 30753. 30-year-old Amanda Ward Romine disappeared from Springfield in Ohio on the 5th of July, 2013, and she's not been seen or heard from since that day. At the time, she and Daniel Michael Romine had been married for a year, and they were living at 937 Avondale Avenue. The last family member to see Amanda was her sister, who lived in Indian Lake, Ohio, where she was visiting at the time. On the day of her disappearance, she left her sister's house to travel back home. But the following day, she contacted her sister once more and asked if she could pick her up on the 7th, 2 days after heading back to Springfield. She was then spotted by a witness on Buxton Avenue in Springfield, but she's not returned home since and remains missing. When she still hadn't returned home by the 9th of August, a missing person case.
The Democrats love it. You know, the Democrats love it and the Republicans don't. It's very interesting. The vaccines, they love it.
Donald Trump is actually, it seems, acknowledging that there was some problems with Operation Warp Speed and the mRNA program. You hear Donald Trump say, "Oh, beautiful vaccines, so fast." But now Trump, it appears, could be about to admit that there was a problem with the vaccine program and maybe even the vaccines themselves. I can see the comments. I know you don't even like calling them that. I was just doing it for expedience. Don't call them vaccines. It means they've conquered your mind. Let's have a look now at Donald Trump coming close to admitting, and I know a lot of you would like this, that there was something wrong with that medication.
On COVID, you frequently say at your rallies and so on that you don't feel like you get enough credit on COVID. But by nearly every assessment, the CDC failed miserably at job one. And yes, the COVID vaccines were developed in record time, but as we now know, they don't prevent infection, illness, or transmission, and they have very potentially serious side effects. Do you think that maybe they were approved too fast? And in hindsight, based on what we know now, what would you have done differently?
Well, I think they're doing studies on the vaccines, and we're going to find out. And it'll come out one way or the other. But I really had a mandate to get vaccines done, and I got them done very quickly in record time. The Democrats love it. You know, the Democrats love it, and the Republicans don't. It's very interesting. The vaccines, they love it.
They love it. It's funny, isn't it? Because it did become such a hotly politicized issue. It's odd, really, because that oughtn't be the approach to a medical solution to a problem that did not prevent transmission or, ultimately, it appears, hospitalization, and increasingly, it seems, may have contributed to excess deaths. That's something that's just conjecture, obviously, at this point. But certainly the yellow card and VARS event do not look favorable. And it's been subsequently established that there are causal links to myocarditis and pericarditis that were potentially known about long before it was published, as well as the impact on menstruating and indeed potentially.
Parlez-vous vestiaire collectif? Can you say authentic?
Can you say hater?
Can you say the real thing?
Can you say the real thing?
Can you say vestiaire collective?
Can you say goodbye, haters? Goodbye. Oh, please.
13-year-old Bradley Hansen left his home on November 10th, 1995, without telling his mother that school had been canceled. Instead, he snuck over to a friend's home and